Call this work session of the Brookhaven City Council to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, Mayor J. Max Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Rebecca Williams, District 1.
Here.
Councilmember John Park, District 2.
Here.
Councilmember Bates Madison, District 3,
On his way.
on his way. And Councilmember Joe Gebbia is arriving later, around 5.
Correct.
But we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any opening remarks other than to say, welcome back. Upcoming agenda items. Have nothing there. Other agenda items and other business.
Yes, under the first item, this is just to give you notice, and you have copies of a notebook that include the adopted budget. There was some formatting that you all had requested. That's been taken care of. There's also the budget memo that goes to the citizens, which is authored by the mayor and myself and signed in the same. It includes the general fund, and it includes each department from the standpoint of expenditures. Remember, this is an operations budget, so we are reflecting the anticipated revenues. Remember, at our public hearings, I did make mention, and Rob also stated as well, that we were being very conservative, especially in our revenues from hotel motel tax and also property taxes ad valorem. We do expect that they're going to be larger numbers than what we've shown, but we will adjust those when we get to June and July of this year. Also, there is a budget narrative beginning on page 14 that addresses each different department, makes mention of what's new or what's different with explanation. And then it goes into the fund accounts, from confiscated funds to 911 to stormwater utility and homestead exemption. It also has a listing in the appendix that lists the positions by title, showing what the current rate of pay is, what the proposed 3% increase is. And you'll remember that included in the budget was an anticipated 3% increase, which 1.5% or 50% of that 3% reflects cost of living.
Okay.
So this is the adopted budget.
Thank you for this. Marie and whoever else did this.
Let's put that together.
And is this on our website?
It is currently.
This format and everything?
Yes,
you
everything
very
that
much.
you have
All right, so folks,
is on the website.
all right. Appreciate that. Update of park purchase.
Okay, that's our city attorney.
All right. This matter relates to, I think, what was addressed at the last meeting concerning the property located on Claremont Road. We engaged an attorney to do the title examination and found that the property is owned by DeKalb County, the 30 acres. And
The crash zone property.
the crash zone property. And we are meeting with the county tomorrow as far as initiating discussions concerning what the county intends to do with that property and whether or not there's an opportunity for the city to participate with that property itself. As it relates to the other park matters, again, we're meeting again with the county again tomorrow to push the issue involving Brookhaven Park. They have pretty much stonewalled our city manager concerning going and reviewing the building there, even though she's done the work to come up with somewhat of a needs assessment that's there. So we intend to either ask them to proceed forward, or we're going to go ahead and ask them to convey all the property sans the building pad and
So what do you
proceed
mean?
that way.
You're going to ask them to proceed forward, or why don't we just ask them to go ahead and convey the property instead?
Well, the issue is not the back part. They can convey that. The issue is the front part, and they're alleging that it's not parkland, though everything, showed it as being parkland. And frankly, I think on a fiscal basis, it would behoove them to do it, because then all the maintenance and everything would be taken away from them other than that building. There is one issue relating to the back property as far as the access. the county did not create a reciprocal access easement between the back parcel and the front parcel, which has the access to the road that leads into it. And part of what we've asked for is that easement, and we've sort of gotten a cold shoulder. However, as you well know, they can't put us in a position to landlock us. We have no other means to get to a public street but through that basis. So,
Well, what, you know, this has been going on for quite a while, and I understand that's not your fault. They're just telling you what they're telling you. What I would like from them is from you and then from them, I'd like a direct question from you and then a direct answer from them. Do they have any intention of conveying the front 10 acres of park property to the city of Brookhaven? If they say no, then.
then we'll decide how we want to proceed.
Correct. But I would
Okay.
like to hear,
Okay.
like to have that in an email tomorrow after you meet with them so that we can know how to proceed forward with letting our citizens know what DeKalb County is planning on doing and so we can have
Yeah.
certainty.
Unless, you know,
Is there any comment on that?
assuming the county attorney has talked with her client and is prepared to give that answer, she'll probably tell me she'll have to come back to us.
We've asked that, have we not, before?
Yeah, oh, yeah, we've asked it. I told them we wanted it. In fact, we included it in our notice that we were acquiring it.
Okay.
Right. But just be prepared that, because Tom and I have received this already and asking that direct question, that there may be two answers.
Oh.
The first answer would be yes, predicated on certain obligations of the city for the service center, which is what we were told back last summer. And then secondly, yes, you can buy it for market value, and we heard that, which was about $4 million.
Okay.
So
Which
there
is in
might be-
violation of the statute.
Correct. Well, they contend, or at least they did at that time, it was not a park.
We've got other evidence that
We
says.
do.
Right. Okay.
Well, they showed it as a
But
park
the-
on their maps.
Well, the sign still says park.
Park.
Correct.
Right.
That's right, it does. And there's still, we still have Osborne Park that has not been conveyed by virtue of the fact that we still need to examine the drums that are there. And Laura is following up with that too.
Why hadn't we examined the drums? I thought that became a non-issue, though.
No, it's not a non-issue, it's just a matter of going in and having them inspected. But they have not been inspected yet.
Is there a reason why they haven't been inspected? We're not allowed to, or
No,
would Park and Recs inspect them, or we have to hire a firm?
Have to hire an engineering firm, hazardous waste or whoever.
An initial Phase 1 was performed on it. However, recommendations were coming back for additional testing, and so it's a question as to whether to move forward with that additional testing and also to get our city guys out there to take a look with the permission of the county.
Are you all in favor of having that done ASAP?
Yeah.
I mean, let's tomorrow morning.
Unless there's some huge cost involved that you need to make us aware of, yeah, we need to bring in Osborne Park.
Yeah, so absolutely, first thing.
Laura, before you leave, would you discuss the other park that the county says is not a park? And whether or not the city has an interest in it or not?
One additional park that we saw on the city's list was Fernwood Park. And this is a park, as Tom mentioned, that the county is claiming, according to their records, is not park property. So therefore, it did not come over at the initial time that the other parks did. They're saying that they're treating it as part of their stormwater maintenance area. And so we were waiting to see whether the city wished to proceed with that and acquiring that park.
Well, don't we have the stormwater as part of our services? I mean, if it's stormwater property, shouldn't it be our property too, that way?
I'll have to go back and look at exactly what they were saying was on that property, but I do recall that did not come over at the time because they were saying it was not park property, and so therefore it would not come over as the other park properties did under the statute.
My understanding is that property, along with several other parcels, were part of a buyout over time by the county using FEMA And what Laura is saying is correct, it's not a park, but it is a purchase for floodplain management. And those funds that were used to do that were federal funds. And I have already given notice to the county with the county manager in agreement directing his staff, his stormwater management staff, to inventory all of those parcels and to convey them to us.
And there's no charge for that, I guess.
No.
There shouldn't be. So that's,
That's not the only parcel either.
No, there's
No.
several parcels. There's like in the 10s and 20s.
is there a sign at Fernwood Park that says Fernwood Park? You know? You know? Any kind of
There
signage?
is something.
Good idea.
We can look at our title notes to
Right.
see if there was, if that when it was conveyed to the county as to whether or not there are any conditions put on it or for the purpose of it.
Is that the property with the non-functioning retention pond? Is that
That's the one behind Marta, I think.
kind of Marta?
Or is it Fernwood? Or is
Fernwood's on Dresden, right?
the one behind
Parkside is
Marta?
on Dresden.
The Apple Valley one.
Right.
That's called what? That's called Fernwood? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. All right.
I would just encourage you all, though, if you're meeting with the county, these discussions have gone on now for 2 years.
Yeah.
So let's fish or cut bait here.
Well, I agree, and I think a lot of it has been a sort of where it's been dallying is because of the Brookhaven Park issue and trying to see if there's, something meaningful that can be meaningful discussion and agreement that can come with the county. But over the last, I guess probably 9 months, 6 to 9 months since we met with them the last time, it's gone cold, and frankly, it's difficult to even schedule meetings with them. We were hoping to have had this meeting prior to this meeting, so we would have something more tangible to talk about.
Do we need to be in touch with the CEO or somebody above Vivian's pay grade?
I'll get in touch with Zach Williams to
Okay.
let him know
But
that
Zach
we're
has
ready.
not been real cooperative, so.
Well, let us know if there's something.
I will.
that-
I mean,
that we can-
we've got to activate in some way.
Yeah.
If that's what we need to release what they're trying to say, what they're saying. If they're asking us to pay $4 million for the park, our citizens need to know that, and the county needs to know that. And then our legal team obviously needs to, $100 an acre statute needs to come into play. And all that goes along with it. All right? Next.
Okay, the next item is the discussion of Convention and Visitors Bureau creation. If you'll recall at our last meeting, I made mention that we do need to create the Convention Visitors Bureau. It's already been called out for and created through the charter. And for purposes of accounting for all the hotel motel tax that's coming in, remember 40% goes to tourism, 60% can be kept in the general fund. But it's really time now that, we formalize our efforts in tourism and convention trade.
What do we need to do?
Well, that's what I'm going to comment on. There's two parts to this. One is activating the CVB, and the other is that if you wish to consider raising the motel-hotel tax, then we have another discussion on that also. But the first, as far as the activation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, it can take two forms. One form would be to create what's called a Section 115 corporation, which is similar to your finance corporation, which would incorporate this Convention and Visitors Bureau. You would go through the Internal Revenue Service and obtain a tax exemption for it, and also obtain an exemption from filing of income tax returns. It would be what would be called a C6 organization, which is a business league, chamber of commerce type organization that could be done there. The benefit of that would be is that people could make contributions, that there could be outside memberships, there's other ways of funding that could be done there. The detriment of it is that it's just another administrative entity and something that you've got to manage, and also would be coupled with certain reporting requirements to DCA, which we don't believe would be the case if we just treated the Bureau as really a division of our city government, which is the other option that can be done there. And just leave it within the city, just like any board or anything else. Now, what
Would
we,
change from present how Mike Vescio is running that department? What would change with the creation of this bureau?
Well, if it's a bureau board of the city, then nothing changes. If it becomes a 501c6 and it's its own governing board, then he becomes an employee of the board.
I mean, either way, it becomes, either way, you can set the organization, and as far as how it's going to govern itself, the governance of it is something that you can direct either way.
Marie, do you have any suggestion on that, on which format? I mean, Tom's told us the advantages or disadvantages, and just want to know what you think.
My preferences and my experience has been that it is a separate and apart board at arm's length from the city,
It's the
with
best
its
way to
own
do it.
governing body and its own ability to manage the funds that come in. Because remember, when we were doing the budget, I mentioned to you that we would come back after the creation of the CVB and have a budget, because there's going to be a number of things that we're going to have to do. I think in the interim, things can stay as they are, but to grow this organization, to be able to attend to a number of other activities, especially on the convention trade, we're going to need some additional assistance.
As a board we would appoint?
Yes.
Yes. It would be an alter ego of the city, and even to the point that you could appoint city representatives to the board also. So it's not,
Like Spurgeon Richardson?
or any of you.
Oh.
So it can be done that way. The other, just so that we have the issue of sovereign immunity. If it's within the city, then it's not an issue. If it's within this board, then, we're talking additional insurance requirements and those types of things relative to that. And I'm saying you could keep it inside the city and make it easy, or go ahead and incorporate it and recognize that probably down the road, that's going to be the thing you're going to want to do anyway, and just go ahead and bite the bullet and do it now because of where the city is and the growth of the city. It will likely be a large organization. You may even have your own convention facility someday. You just, you don't know. So if you're going to, I think you would end up doing it anyway, and it would likely be less expensive to do it today than what it would be 10 years from now.
And if there is our own convention facility, then that's a conversation that we'll be planning for the January 27th council meeting on increasing the hotel motel tax to allow for that.
Okay.
And moving to that discussion, what I would like to do is Laura has been studying this, and it is somewhat twisted, but to come up with a primer for the council to understand how it works in the event that you raise the tax, and what it has to be used for. And it's almost like when you do that, it's like a redo. You're giving up your 5, but then you're creating the new 8. The city's not losing any revenues, but then all of a sudden, how you earmark the money is dependent upon how much you raise it. So it's
Well, it
not
becomes
simple.
restricted funds for a sole purpose. But the ability to raise it, and we'll wait for the opportunity to have a full educational forum on it, but the ability to raise those funds and dedicate, and it to be dedicated for certain purposes, one of which would be for the expansion of sports facilities. it becomes a great tool to leverage that 3%, those 3 pennies off of every dollar to service debt, to do a bond, or borrow funds in order to purchase land and improve the land. Further, it would allow us to improve our land as another source of funds outside of host for capital improvements for our existing parks.
All right. Thank you.
If you would like, we would be glad to go ahead and prepare organizational documents and some thoughts about governance
Sure.
for review by the council at the next work session.
Okay. All right.
I do have one question on it, though. So the change in the tax rate of the hotel motel tax and the creation of the CVB are mutually exclusive.
That's right.
But is there a requirement for the city to create the CVB, since we are accepting hotel motel tax at the 5% right now?
In my meetings with the Department of Community Affairs, they're very uncomfortable with us continuing in our
'Cause-
current operation without it. Your
Right.
charter already creates it,
Yeah.
but they were willing to be flexible for the first 2 years because we were a startup, and they extended that
Right.
privilege to the other new cities as
Yeah,
well.
it's
So this really
created.
is
So they're
a-
fine with us creating it either separately or within the city?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can do it either way.
So, all right. And
If you're contemplating increasing it, okay, then the Bureau should be initiated. You should make it active. Right now, it sort of sits in an inactive state. It's
Right.
been created, but you have to activate it.
And it is a separate, so the real question comes to, is this a separately incorporated body, or is this a subsidiary
It
of the
can
city?
be, either way.
Well, it wouldn't be, if it were incorporated, it wouldn't have members. Okay, there wouldn't be shares of stock issued, but it would be deemed to be governmentally controlled. So, which would then drive the tax considerations that we were talking about.
And are there any restrictions from a policy standpoint about, whether, the interaction between boards? So our board, our governing board is a mayor and council, and their board, will we have oversight? Will this board, this
Absolutely, yeah,
governing board, have oversight over this?
You'll be appointing the board.
Okay.
Okay, and so those are when we start talking about pulling governance together, those are the things that we have to examine as far as, who appoints, whether you have a district appointment or whether it's at large or, whatever, but or whether it's a mayor appointment subject to council approval. I mean, you all have to decide that among yourselves.
And this is strictly an internal change. This is not, nothing about this has to go to the legislature, does it?
No.
All right.
Unless, I'll take that back, unless you want to raise the tax. Then
Yeah, the tax rate's
Then
different.
then that would be local legislation. And, that's probably, that's a decision that needs to be made at the next meeting.
So it sounds like we need to move ahead with this. So it sounds to me like, do I understand you're going to go ahead and give us the information about a primer on this?
That's right.
And hopefully by our next meeting or work session, we'll be prepared to go forward with this.
Yeah, or let's say you'll hopefully be suitably educated, one, to make the decision about whether or not to request the tax increase. I think that timing-wise, that's the most critical.
Right.
Then the other, then we can then proceed with the organization of the entity, but then really getting down to its governance is going to be the thing that's going to really drive what's there. And what we would do is go to other ones that have incorporated and, just get some examples of how they're governed, how their board's chosen, and the like.
I'm kind of sorry we're not talking about the hotel motel tax increase today, because we were talking today about setting up a luncheon with our legislative delegation on that Monday following the Mayor's Day weekend down at GMA, and that's the 26th. And that, I had envisioned it like we did a couple of years ago, where we bring our whole delegation in, get a review from them as to what their package is, and then any requests that we have. But if we're not going to talk about this till the 27th, then it's kind of after the fact. I mean, it's not that we can't do that, but I just throw that out there.
All right. Next, discussion of the police officers at school drop-offs.
Yes, Councilman Park and I have had a number of conversations, and if you'll allow me just to make a couple of statements, and I think Councilman Park will want to fill in quite a bit. As you know, we have schools here in the city, and especially our primary schools or the elementary schools. We see a lot of carpooling and drop-off by parents, and what we've been told by parents and what we have observed ourselves is that we don't always have the drivers following the rules of law in accordance with not only the roads, but also the regulations, if you will, that the school themselves have set up on where children need to be dropped off, and so that they can have a safe exit from the car and enter into the school safely. In the budget, we provided, funds for a number of things, one of which in the police department was funds for overtime, as well as the hiring of part-time police officers. We have found that in our police department, we do community policing. We have police beats or zones, and it's a deterrent to crime, and that is the practice that allows us to meet the standard that you all set for a 3-minute emergency response time. What we don't have time for, unfortunately, with our force is to pick up prisoners and transport them from the county jail when they have to make an appearance before our municipal court, or a transport from municipal court if the judge finds that they need to be locked up. They have to be transported to the county jail, or even bailiff duties and other duties that are necessary to the overall operations of the police department. So instead of using officers and paying exorbitant amounts in overtime, I found that it was more reasonable and more affordable for the city to, we cut our overtime in half, but we also dedicated funds for the hiring of 4 additional part-time police officers. In their duties, as I've just mentioned, one of which could also be providing safety and patrol for these drop-off areas at all of our, especially elementary schools. What's been happening heretofore in District 2, at the request of the parents for us to come out, and I will say that the parents themselves have been funding this activity with off-duty police officers, but we have been able to work with that school and those parents by providing one of our own police officers while on duty. However, with this caveat, and that is if an emergency arises, that officer is going to be pulled off. Well, last Friday, we had 2 emergencies right during the height of school drop-off, and of course, they were pulled off. That officer was pulled off to be able to back up and respond to an emergency that was occurring in District 1, in fact, and all officers from the beats converged to that location, 2 separate locations. So, as a result, in working with Councilman Park, we're looking for ways in which we can address this concern and take a look at, and the conversation he and I have had is that we can't just do it for one school, we need to take a look at all schools. The chief did meet with the Director of Public Safety for the Board of Education about this matter, and they said they have no funds and they're not going to put any funds into accommodating the carpool lanes. The chief is going to have a meeting. I think he had it last week. Did you have it last week, Chief?
No, it's this Friday at
This Friday,
8
okay,
o'clock.
excuse me, I thought it was Thursday, either last week or this week, to talk about solutions. But the point that I'm trying to get to, and I'll turn it over to Councilman Park, is that, each of you have discretionary funds, and those funds can be used for a purpose that you deem proper and necessary that can accommodate needs within your district, specific to your district, and outside of what has been budgeted. They are discretionary funds. I have encouraged you in the past to find ways where you can bridge those funds and create larger projects, especially where your borders are contiguous. And you have done that in the past with sidewalks. So that's just a reminder of how your discretionary funds work. If this point in using discretionary funds, if that is your desire, in talking with the chief and also with our HR director, Rick Stone, because the source of funds are city funds, we still have the obligation and the liability of workers' comp if some parent's not paying attention and they injure the police officer. So they're still on duty, working under the city's requirements, covered by the city's liability. In this case, it would be workers' comp. So this item is on the agenda, one, to address that there is a need, and it's become evident to the city that it does need to be addressed. I'm hopeful that the chief's meeting later this week will prove to find a solution that won't cost a lot of money and perhaps may not cost any money. But in the interim, we need to address the point that, if we're using police officers, and what we want to do is use off-duty officers, not overtime, because that's an extra cost, because when we get into overtime, it does affect their benefits, especially the retirement contribution. So it's my preference to stay away from that. But it is a point that we need to acknowledge that there is a liability because it goes back to the source of funds. If these were private funds paying for that officer, then that officer is on his own if he's injured. But if the source of funds come from the city's funds, in this case, whether they're discretionary or budgeted funds, then we do have the responsibility to cover that liability. So that is the introduction, if you will, on my part as to where we are. It is an issue, and it goes on every morning. Unfortunately, we don't have parents that are following the rules, and I think in my last conversation with Councilman Park was that we have unruly parents, but the fact remains that, we do have situations that are created that are dangerous, and we've now been given notice of it. So I think it is our responsibility that we have to address it, whether hopefully this is short-term until a long-term solution can be made, or the school board decides to ante up, or some other form of funds are identified. But if the city funds are used, I just want you all to be aware that we have a liability and we have to cover that. So that's.
When you say all, it has to apply to all schools in the city?
Well, that was the conversation that Councilman Park and I had. If we're providing this service to one school, we have other schools that we've had complaints by parents about their carpool lane as well.
Have we had any schools where we haven't had complaints, or there's not an issue of danger identified by the chief?
Well, that's probably better for the chief to answer.
We've had complaints, and we generally meet, actually, we have more meetings with Montgomery Elementary School
Okay.
prior to school starting, and it's the same complaints,
So it's like,
basically.
I don't know if there's carpool at Cross Keys.
There is, but I'm unaware of any real issues there other than the kids crossing.
So you have
You know,
issues with Ashford Park and Montgomery, the two schools.
Are the main two.
Right.
And I'm sure, if we provide something to Ashford, Montgomery's going to hear about it, and we'll be requested to do the same thing there.
And this is really a school board responsibility, but it's kind of disconcerting that they don't want to.
It is, as Marie said, it's basically the parents that are unruly and non-courteous to the other parents. I've talked to a number of the parents. We've actually got 3 solutions that we're going to try to agree to with the school. The first one is, the main problem is parents are dropping off their kids at the front of the school, and it's not the carpool drop-off lane. They're supposed to go all the way around to the back. My suggestion to the school, if they'll listen, is lock the front door so kids can't go through and force the parents to drop them off there. The second one, and we were asked by some of the parents, do strict enforcement. That put us in a bad light, and we'd still have to have somebody there all the time, and that's just issuing tickets for obstructing traffic for all the parents that are causing that problem.
And the PTAs could just have volunteers?
Most of the schools do have PTA, or actually, the other parents just coming and helping.
Put an orange vest on them and put them where the police officer would go. I don't know.
So I think the PTA did fund a police officer when the it got started in some way, but then-
Actually, they were until I believe it was the 14th or so of December.
But, it's a big budget item for the PTA that was really hurting, and their charge is, how do we support and add on to the needs of the teachers in the classroom, and pay for the other things like art, the portion of the art teacher, and so.
So it's down to the Cobb County Schools not taking care of an issue that's created at their school.
I'd say you have to look at it of, how is Marist handling it, or how is
They pay for it.
OLA doing it?
They pay for it themselves.
You figure out a way to accommodate a solution. I would love to see some kind of long-term solution there. And I don't know that the long-term solution is really having a policeman there.
I think
Well-
the best alternative would be if they will lock the front door, only allow the students to come into the back. That's the drop-off point.
So,
And that would stop the
That's
kids,
for
the parents
Montgomery.
from dropping off, taking shortcuts and turning around.
Well,
and-
no, they would still take a shortcut behind. They not only drop off at the front, but they also drop off behind the dumpsters and walk the kids through. No, and they do.
The cafeteria.
And they also, they want to keep that door open for special projects and for some of the special needs kids that need to come through the front door. So that there are people that are allowed to come through the front door.
Well, that's what we were talking, because we actually had discussions as far as, they put in a new turnaround behind the school where the drop-off is. The school could actually institute some type of identification for the cars, say tags or whatever, where the special needs students could go in through the cut-through turnaround or whatever, and the regular parents would drop off on the street.
Right, and I understand we're going to be discussing that Monday morning with the presidents of the PTA. The fact of the matter is, this issue has been going on for 7 years. Every year, it's basically what ends up happening is a lot of parents get really upset and they write checks and to pay for the police officer. There's always been a grassroots movement to pay for it. Sometimes it's funded, sometimes it's not, and sometimes what ends up happening is it just kind of snowballs, and it'll be fine for a week or even maybe even two, but then you have one person that causes an issue, and then another person gets frustrated, and another person gets frustrated, and there have been yelling matches, there have been almost fistfights. It's not a tenable situation. So I think a good long-term solution is the very affordable part-time police officers to basically patrol for half an hour during that time. I can't speak to Montgomery, but that is the issue at Ashford Park. Everything has been tried. As far as I can see, I've had, I don't know how many meetings with parents concerning this issue, lots of discussions on social media, and every time they have these exact same discussions, why isn't the county handling it? Why can't we, do a better job logistically? But when it comes down to it, the consensus at the end always is, we need a police officer. And sometimes the parents get together and pay for it, and sometimes they don't. But
What's your suggestion?
my suggestion is for any school that needs it, and I don't think every school needs it, to provide a part-time police officer for that half hour during the carpool. Because even
Morning
though-
or the afternoon? Or
just
both?
in the morning, just in the morning. Because it is, yes, technically school property, but it is in a public right-of-way. And, we can talk all day long about, what should be or shouldn't be, but the fact is, this is an issue, and the fact is, it needs to be addressed. And there have been, I don't know how many times I read on social media, someone almost getting run over because of a dangerous situation that gets caused, right, unfortunately by other parents, but, it's still an issue, and it needs to be resolved, and it's not.
What would that take from our police department? I guess you'd have the officer that's patrolling that zone at that particular time would be near, but to dedicate somebody for 30 minutes to go around the school for 30 minutes at a certain time every morning, what is that logistically for us, for the police to do? What do you need to do in order to do that?
That's outside the force. These are part-time officers that aren't like our regular full-time
Right.
police officers policing in the police beats.
Right.
It's like transporting prisoners back and forth. It's, doing odd jobs.
So what would it cost to have a part-time officer do the 30 minutes 5 days a week? during the school year?
$25 an hour, $125 a week, $500 a month per school.
$100 a month per school.
And honestly, I'm perfectly fine considering, you look at all the different issues in District 2. I'm perfectly fine, maxing out the discretionary budget for this issue if need be. I don't think it's required, but, we're going to be hiring part-time officers. It's not going to incur a huge cost. And it's going to basically solve an issue that has been a festering wound on the city and has been a real public safety issue for the city. Oh, for the school, for that whole area for the past, I don't know how many years, especially with the overcrowding.
Maybe we should do something. That's what it hasn't stopped us from trying to improve education with the charter school and I don't know.
Yeah, so,
And so for citizens who are having this issue, I mean, we can say, oh, it's the county's job, but, we see how that works sometimes with water billing and other things, so.
right. I think at the end of the day, it will improve the school because it'll create a safer environment for those kids. I also think that it is a discussion that we need to have while I think it's a great Band-Aid, I do think there is a better long-term solution in that, they've got a lot of crumbled, sidewalks there at that school. If we're putting $6,000 a year, we do that for 10 years, we've funded enough that possibly could have actually created a long-term solution on school property in paving something. I think it's a great Band-Aid for right now. But I do think that, look, we know that there are ways that this probably could be handled better. Because at the end of the day, what does the police officer do? Well, I mean, they keep the peace, but I don't think they're really writing tickets. They're there as a threat of enforcement, and they sort of force people to do the right thing.
I was just thinking, how do we allocate something like that? I mean, I just think it's, we do stuff all the time that isn't under our jurisdiction as council members and mayor to help our citizens. If
Well,
it's-
right now, there's a couple of parts to this. First and foremost, it is the council member wants to use his discretionary funds.
I don't think he should have to use his discretionary fund. I
Okay.
think it's something we might need to allocate decide on as a council, because it's not just in his district. There's Montgomery and then maybe even Kittredge that might need it too, but.
Okay. Well, the solution to this would be to hire part-time officers.
Right. How do we do that?
Well, we have that in the budget right now for 4 part-time officers. And our HR department has been, overwhelmed with trying to fill full-time positions. The budget just got approved, and so the funds are available. In fact, after we, hopefully later on the budget, you will find an agreement to pass the TAN so that we can have available funds immediately to us to start assisting us with our operational costs, which would then help us in this vein. One of the things I think is important, and our HR director has just mentioned it to me now and mentioned it previously, and the fix is not going out finding a police officer to work part-time for 30 minutes. That's not going to happen. But
What do you mean that's not going to happen?
because someone's not going to come in post-certified, that's what we want, that's our standard, to come in for 30 minutes and then they go home. So
Right.
we're looking at 4 to 6 hours
Right.
because we have other needs that our patrolling force can't get to. Every time a prisoner is transported, we're taking an officer off the street.
Right, right.
So that's why, looking at the idea of the part-time officers, auxiliary officers, if you will, that are part-time employees of the city, can be dedicated to different functions.
Right.
Whether it's assisting in the court and transport of prisoners, or it's assisting the chief in special projects, or if it's assigning them, when they first report for duty, they're reporting to a school. And then after that hour takes place, then they go on and do their other duties as assigned. That's going to be the most efficient use of funds, not overtime because it affects the benefits.
Right, okay.
Part-time employees receive no benefits, so there is a cost savings there. And then you have a dedicated person, an officer, that is assigned to this specific duty. Right now, the chief can only say, we'll do the best we can, because when there's an emergency, that officer is going to be pulled off. And we've already seen that, not just once last Friday, but we've seen it a couple of times already, just in the first week of school returning. So what we need to do is move forward with what we can do at this point and, create these positions, which they are by budget, and start advertising for that. But in the interim, the fix is, let's see what the chief works out in his meeting, and, we'll have to appropriate funds if that's the desire outside of discretionary funds. And the only way to find those funds would be in the overtime category of the police department. There are no other funds available that can be moved and assigned to this task.
How do we know that there can't be funds moved?
Well, what would you like me to cut?
I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Right now, the best source would be council discretionary funds, which has already been offered by one member. It's not going to be, and as he and I spoke last Friday, this is not the long-term fix.
Right.
This is just in the interim until we can get the officers hired.
Right.
But we have $150,000 in overtime.
And your estimate is to get the part-time officers hired is a month, maybe 2?
Hopefully, it's less than 2 months, but, we've got to advertise, they've got to be interviewed, they've got to have background checks.
Do these
Maybe.
officers, would they have cars?
No, the part-time officers don't have cars.
They don't have cars, so
No.
they'd just be
It's just
in
equipment, they have to be
uniform.
certified, but they'd go through our field training program too, just in case we needed them for
So
something.
they'd be fully uniformed
Right,
and armed officers.
right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you
With
about the transport. Did we not ever look into hooking up with Dunwoody for their transport or Chamblee?
What we found out, we were talking about it, they have different needs and different times that they transport. It's kind of hard to adjust the time periods that we're looking at. There's certain times we probably could, and we're still looking at that, but we can't set up a normal thing because prisoners get picked up when they get picked up a lot of times.
It's hard to carpool them.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions. Chief, at Montgomery, are the issues ongoing, or is it just at the start of school? What's the nature of that?
Generally, in Montgomery, it was at the start of school, and we have usually 1 or 2 pre-school meetings before it starts. This year, there was really no problem, other than traffic, which gets backed up as
Right.
normal. I think the main issue we had was when the construction was going on, when they had the trailers out there.
Right, so I'm not aware that this is an ongoing issue where we need a regular cop there every day.
No.
I guess my question is, just looking at the schools that I'm very familiar with and the carpool lines that I've sat in at Marist and St. Martin's and St. Pius and others, I know Marist and St. Martin's hire an off-duty cop to move the cars from the parking lot out onto Ashford Dunwoody Road or one of the main streets.
Actually, I think St. Martin's just does it for the first week or 2 of school.
Okay.
And then they have their own employees in the parking lot, and they've got a pretty good
There's
system.
usually some strong teacher out there with the bullhorn who keeps the folks in line and tells the parents what the rules are. I'm really bothered that the parents can't follow the rules over there. I
am
have
too.
some concerns. Yeah, I have some concerns about if we offer this to Ashford Park, these other schools, Marist has a traffic cop just about every morning at their light, and they hire off-duty cops all the time when they have events. I'm sure they assume that they're going to continue to do that, but, if I were them, I'd look to us and say, well, we'd like some of that money you're handing out too for police resources. I'm just baffled that the school and the parents can't work together for the safety of the children to get this under control without us having to spend, $500 a month, $6,000 a year times, how many schools do we have? 10 schools? It adds up pretty quickly.
I don't think it's 6,000, I think it's, what's the school year, 8 months? But, and it's, yeah, and every time I hear that concern, I say the same thing. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, but what are you going to do? I mean, they've tried for many, many years, and, you know, I mean, I don't know if it's just, if this is just an Astor Park thing, or if this is, you know, prevalent, but it's an issue. And when parents have been cutting checks for many years because of this, I mean, they're putting their money where their mouth is.
So
And
when there's been police presence down there, have they ticketed people?
there's talk of ticketing people, yes.
Well, I mean, maybe they need a
What's
few
gonna
more
come up in
tickets
this
to be
discussion?
written, some enforcement.
And you know, the issue is that it improves for a while, and then it may even, you know, be perfectly fine for a week, but for some reason, it just devolves.
We would have to look at our offenses to determine whether or not it would be covered, and we could you know, we may have to create an offense in
Right.
order to ticket it.
Right. But the thing is, yeah, the fact of the matter is, if the city doesn't step up, parents are just going to go back to paying for it again. And
The other thing is, that I would suggest, is that if we do make some city funds available for this, that the PTOs or the parents have some skin in the games too, that maybe we split the cost with them or something.
I don't think they would be entirely against that.
Good luck. I mean,
Maybe if
really,
you
I
offer it
mean,
to 'em,
you
you
could
say-
offer it to them, but I mean.
Well, if
it's,
they've
you know,
already been paying for it, though.
Well, we say we'll split it.
paying for
Well,
half of it
basically,
is better
what
than-
happens is, you know, this is, you know, I've sat down and met and had very long conversations, much longer than this conversation. And what happens is, you know, parents pay for it, it gets a little better, and you know, the money runs out. Then it goes on for a few weeks, and then it just it becomes so untenable, they dig deeper and raise money. It's just a never-ending cycle of just gets worse, gets better, gets worse, gets better. And they've tried so many different approaches. They've tried I mean, we can go down the list. I can go on and on and on about all the different things that they've tried, but for some reason, it just hasn't worked. And
Maybe just float to them that, you know, it might be more amenable to the city if there was a split, a 50-50 split. If they raised 50% of it, we might match them.
Just keep in mind, whatever the percentage of share is, if there's $1 as the source of funds coming from the city, we have liability. So just keep that in mind.
All right, next item. This form, the discussion of employee evaluation form.
Yes, I have our HR director here with us. I emailed to you all. You had asked at the last meeting that you were holding the employee raises until you had a better idea of what the performance evaluation form was. I've sent that to you. I didn't hear from any of you, so I'm hoping that meant that you all were satisfied with it. We're ready to start using it, and if you have any questions.
Can we not
Rick
have the
can-
form here with us, though, on this?
Excuse me?
The form, it's not, you can't click on it from this.
No. We can have copies made. Would you like
Yeah,
that?
that'd be great, because while we're discussing the form, it'd be nice to have the
Okay.
paper copy of it, or I can't get it on from my.
I actually answered you back and
Yeah,
gave just
you did.
one
Thank you.
suggestion, but it was fairly minor. I had printed mine out.
Thank you.
If you wanted to make.
Got it right here.
Yeah.
Make sure they're, when we have, okay. But if it says discussion, you need to ask them for it.
I like this a lot. I guess what I wanted to know is, Marie or Rick, do you envision then that each department head uses this form to evaluate their employees under them, or would you do all the employees?
No, I don't do the employees.
Okay.
It's the department heads
Okay.
who would do that. And
And
the
s-
assistant city manager works with me on evaluating the department heads.
Okay. And so, for instance, the chief would use this as well.
Well, the chief also has his form that he uses. This is First of all, this is part one of two parts of a little bit longer story. This is what we suggest to use this year. We have released a bid request for a salary survey performance measurement program that we will institute beginning in 2016. It's a very long process because there are individual interviews and questionnaires that each staff member has to fill out as to what their job is, what their functions are, what their educational levels are, and that information, and then salaries, and then we look at salary ranges. So it is a very complex project. So we will be looking at that. That will come back to the council late this year for review and adoption. And in the interim, we'll be using this form.
And then the other question I had is, so for instance, the 3% that we've got on the table right now, according to the guidelines here, so 1.5% COLA would be awarded to everybody, is that correct?
correct.
And then you'd be eligible for a performance-based merit increase, but it's divided into,
The math doesn't add up on that first page.
yeah, the 1% or the 1.5 or up to 2%, but 2 and 1.5 is going to put you over the 3%.
Right, because we think that not everybody may receive an additional 1.5%.
Okay, so there's
if they-
probably some money left in the budget.
Correct.
Okay.
You think that everybody might not receive a, I mean, it says that.
1.5%, that would be a COLA, cost of
Right.
living.
But
And then
the
there's-
first sentence says the increased pool for 2014 is 3.0%. But in the recommendations, it is an option for up to 3.5%.
Correct.
It's not going to be 3.5 for everybody, because some
Right.
people may make a 1.5, they may get 2% increase.
Or 2.5.
Some may get 3.5.
I understand that. I just didn't know if what we talked about in the budget was a 3%, you're just talking about an overall 3%, some people get 4, some people get 2, and,
We won't exceed the 3% total budget. We'll stay within the budgeted dollars, but it'll be allocated based on their
you
performance.
won't exceed the 3%, but some people might get more than 3%.
Correct.
And some might get less than 3%.
Right.
So it's, those who underperform get less, those who overperform get rewarded. But it'll all be equal to
3%.
what you budgeted.
I have two quick questions. There's no risk that, how big of a risk do you think is that we have amazing employees and everyone gets a great review and we're on the hook for 3.5% in aggregate?
Yeah, how do you control that? What if everybody gets the extra 2%?
Is there a risk of that?
You all control that.
I mean,
I mean,
I know that, but.
But if it comes to the point that if everybody's, scores a 5 or whatever it is, then 3%, they'd all be capped at 3%.
What if you're the guy who, if this is done on the anniversary date, and by
Right.
the time you're at the end of the year, and now the pot of
Money's
money
gone.
is down to the
Yeah.
bottom, and you may be deserving of the 3.5, but
There's
really,
no money
there's not
left.
enough money left.
Wake comp
You can,
should-
you can come back and amend your budget, if you get to that point at the part in the middle of the year, amend the budget for that.
I feel
mean,
sorry for
that's-
the December anniversary
I mean,
guys.
you can, you all can drive yourselves crazy
You up
thinking about the
first.
what ifs.
Yeah.
Or you can just say
Yeah, well, I'm-
3% is the cap.
Well, I mean,
period,
my
and
question-
exemplary performance doesn't get recognized.
I-
mean, it's whatever you want to do.
I understand all that. My question was, what's really the risk? I mean, in your experience, does that happen?
That's,
No.
Rick,
Okay, then that's fine. That
No,
was my
because
question.
what every department head should know is what their annual salaries are.
So they have to
3% of
determine-
that annual
Gotcha.
salary is X.
Okay.
They can't exceed X without her approval.
Okay. And the other question I had is the 1.5%. How did we come to that number? Is that based on some kind of index, or is that, or we set that arbitrarily, or is that going to change? How is that?
Well,
If we have rampant inflation in the next year or the year after, are we gonna address that, or if we have?
for 2015.
Right. But my question is, how do we come about with that number, and is that,
The COLA number.
yeah?
Yeah, well,
Social Security gave 1.7. If you look at others, COLA's pretty much running 1.5. There's only, we can do it any way you want to do it. We
Those
can
are just best practices.
put COLA and do a merit raise, or you can just say out with COLA and give everybody a merit increase. So
I think
we have
COLA's
an
good.
option.
I think
I think COLA's good. I think people understand it because you're giving it to them because the cost of living's higher.
Right.
Then I think there should be a component where you get rewarded for good performance, because I think it causes
Right.
people to want to exceed expectation, not meet expectation.
Right.
But that number's going to move, John, every year based on what the
Right.
market is. We're going to have to stay competitive to get the right quality people in place.
Okay.
So what this year may be 3, last year it was 3.5. This year you guys agreed on 3. Next year it may be a downed economy, it might be 0. There might be years when it's 5. I think that's going to move. There are plenty of compensation companies, Towers and Perrin, that do comp surveys every year. All this is pretty much public information on what the private sector's doing. I think we can look at DCA surveys and see what governmental indices are doing. So we're not really exceeding, we're just trying to meet what our competitors are doing so that we get the right quality of person in the place.
It's just subjective, we're just kind of taking a look at what everyone else is doing and just.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
that's
it's
fine.
based on science, it's not just a number we said, hey,
Right,
this looks good.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
But it is something that we, the council, will take up every year
Right.
and analyze and put that in the budget, whether it's a 2% raise, a 5% raise, a 0 raise.
I mean, if we have really low inflation, we may just say 0 COLA, right?
Right,
So,
exactly.
But we set that,
Exactly, but we set that.
okay.
So, Rick, I wanted to ask you, the actual performance measures, these 7 measures that you've looked at, tell me a little bit about how these came to be, or if this is drawn from best practices, or how widely used are these kind of measures?
I think one of the reasons we arrived at these is I think these are behavioral traits that will drive performance. When you look at the people we're going to be evaluating, the lion's share of them are police officers. I think you can do pay for performance, and you can have metrics and measurements that are obtainable and achievable. But in my recommendation, I don't think a police officer should be put on a metrics, like how many stop tickets do they give, or how many accidents.
Absolutely not.
So I think for the lion's share of our employees, it should be behavioral based. Do they work well with others? Do they comprehend their job? Do they work unsupervised? Is their attendance good? Do they have accidents? Do they have injuries? I think there's a lot of things that we can measure that drive performance. And these were really based on that lion's share of people. If you think about those that are in a leadership position, I think this will migrate into or build itself into a more of a performance metric based. But I don't think that's a one-size-fits-all. I think that's more for leadership.
I'll ask you one thing. Which one of these 7 categories, I looked through them, timeliness of projects done? I mean, not timeliness of when you get there, but like, hey, you said you'd have this in 2 weeks, and you did it in 12 days instead. You know, what would that fall under? I mean, quantity of work or dependability or?
I think it could fall in any one of those categories. On the back page, we've left a section to just rate somebody a 2 and not sit down and have some dialogue with the individual.
Right.
And document on this summary page on why they got the 2.
Right.
I think the dialogue is just as important as the rating itself, because if you don't tell people the performance is bad, they're never going to improve it. So I think that's where a good supervisor is keeping, as the year goes on, areas of improvement. Hopefully, they've already had those conversations with them, and they've got that noted in their file, and they pull those things out and to note that in this evaluation.
So that maybe is under quantity of work?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah, I'd say it's quantity of work.
Okay, all right. Any more questions about this?
Yeah,
I
two.
like it, by the way, thank you. This is good.
When I look at this and I'm reading down categories 1 through 7, a lot of this is subjective. Okay, and I would very much, except for example, even when you look at point number 2, where it says assess degree to which employee meets or exceeds expectation for normal performance. Who sets that criteria for normal performance?
It's going to be the person evaluating them.
But the person evaluating. Okay. I think that's a deficit in this. I think we really need to have objective ways to measure. Subjective leaves it up to, could be personal relationships between 2 individuals. If somebody likes somebody or if somebody doesn't, for example. I don't think it really allows for an equal base of measurement for all. Now, it's not inappropriate to have a subjective, but I would very much be in the position to say a certain percentage of the evaluation needs to be based on an objective criteria that all people are measured equally. There has to be a subjective part. How well do you get along with other employees, for example, is subjective. How well do you contribute towards the cause of the team?
So, that's a little hard, and I think number 7 kind of is one.
Never said it was going to be easy.
Yeah, objective, but Rick, what is your response? I mean, because we, and Rebecca and I talked about this a little bit too, that, this is, and we've all talked about this in the past. It is hard to find objective criteria for a government position. I mean, it's not like you have, how many candles did you sell? How many yards did you gain as a rusher? How many hours did you bill as an attorney? I mean, I guess there could be some things, but it had to be department specific. How many sidewalks, how many cubic yards of sidewalks were put in, according to what the budget was and what was the time, but then what was the weather element to it? So it's kind of hard to do that for a government position. Do you have any suggestions for how to address at least a portion of what Joe's talking about? Because I think he's got a point, but I know it's very hard to do that in this kind of.
I would agree with Joe on the objective behavior for a manager position that has impact on how the overall success of the city. This is kind of the first step in that migration. We're at the end of the year, so to put an objective criteria of moving 10 widgets, that's what you were held accountable for. To evaluate them now on behavior January through December, it's after the fact. They didn't even know what they were being measured on. So I think this first shoot out of the pass, or first pass at this, it's fair that we use this. Then once we establish goals and objectives, and I think it's more applicable to a leader managerial position where you have targets and goals and stretch goals, they got to be obtainable, they got to be achievable, they got to be measurable. I don't think we have those in place, Joe, at this time to say that every police officer is going to be measured by X. And I don't think, quite frankly, that our administrative people, our permit techs, and our police officers, I don't think they're a good candidate for that type of performance-based evaluation. That's my professional opinion. For management people, such as directors and managers, absolutely.
I too would be cautious about, I don't know what kind of objective measures exactly you've got in mind, but we don't want to measure our cops on how many tickets you write or how many bad guys you arrest, or the people who do our permitting, building permits, they have no control over how many people apply for permits. I mean, at some point, we can certainly measure what is our turnaround time in some of our divisions. Customer service satisfaction
We need to start doing
reports.
that. I mean,
Well, the challenge in my statement would be to really start thinking about what could be measurable in an objective format.
but would you
And it's going
agree-
to vary, because you're right, this is a government entity, and it
Yeah.
is different than a business where you're not just moving the 10 widgets that you refer to. But I do think that's important, and you just mentioned it, Rebecca. Okay, we can't control how many permits, but did they process the permit within the designated specified 3-day period or 10-day period set forth by council?
So would you, it seems to me that's something that we could ask our department heads or direct our city manager to ask our department heads to
Right.
start working on those kind of measures.
Right.
And in the same way, I would want the department heads to have some responsibility for turnover and some other things that affect that person's department. But again, being a government, we're not revenue producers, we're not profit-making, we're not in the sales business, we're not selling cars, we're not, making widgets. So I think we got to be careful about what our goals are. I know Rick has talked to me about when he was at UPS, he was judged on how many accident-free days you had in the workforce. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable. Now, maybe at some point, we need to make sure our guys aren't having accidents too. But again, I would leave that up to the chief to decide what are some of the goals that you want to hit. I personally think this is a good start. We've been kind of behind the 8 ball on this, and I'm personally anxious for us to go ahead and authorize the city manager to go ahead and start reviewing employees and getting them in line for the kind of increases that we've put in the budget.
I'm fine with that, with this. This is the only thing I want to add to that. I think this is a good start and a good document. And I realize that some of the criteria, that some of what Joe is talking about, one thing it's going to do is to come up with, it's going to take more work. It's not easy to determine what, what the time should be. And an example, a permit, for a building permit, the 10-day turnaround goal we have to be able to assess, some of those permits don't happen in 10 days because of whatever the submission was from the person who's submitting it. But we've got to be able to come up with a criteria to measure a 10-day turnaround time for our community development department with a typical example. If you had A, B, C, and D, and the permit wasn't turned around in 10 days, you haven't met your goal. That's going to require some work and some thought, obviously, how to do that. But I would like to see from staff, at least, each department can start with something to give the council an objective to criteria to know how we're actually doing rather than just feedback from citizens or whatnot. And I would like to start small with one item maybe for each department on what they think could be an objective measurement.
I think this is good conversation, but remember what I said just a few minutes ago. We have already released an RFP for performance measures, salary review, salary survey. That's what the consulting team will do. They will sit down with each individual department head and each individual staff member to understand the scope of the work that they're performing. We need to ask the employees, what do you do? Some of these measurements they're given a timesheet. What are you doing from 8:30 to 9:30? Write it down. What are you doing? What's your job description? I mean, we'll have job descriptions that'll be created out of this or refined from what we currently have. We'll be looking at what their current rate of pay is, and we'll look at that and make a determination, are they being paid too much or too less for the duties for which they've been assigned? I think we're going to find that some of our employees are assigned more duties than what really is in the scope of that position. I think what it's going to lead to, and it'll be helpful for me to come back to you all to talk about the need for additional employees in specific areas. We can't have expectations of employees to turn around permits in X number of days when the permit turnaround is all predicated on the person submitting the request for a permit. If they are, just like the unruly parents, if they're not going to follow the rules, you're going to have a kink in the...
That's why I pointed out that
Right,
example.
you're going to have a
You
kink
can't
in the
have-
system.
But we should have a way to, on a permit that's done properly, submitted properly with all the forms and everything.
Well, I'm more interested in how does that staff member coach that applicant to make sure that they have a complete set of plans that are coming in so that they can reduce the aggravation of the submitter, thinking, well, I've submitted the plans. Well, maybe they didn't truly understand that. So there are all sorts of ways to do that through education. The department head is responsible for having forums. I mean, since we're talking about community development, we've got the Builders Summit. We're doing that on a quarterly basis, but...
I agree, but we got to find at least some measure of objective performance. And
I agree,
if the
but that's...
consultants can give us
The
that.
consultants are doing that. I think
Right.
asking staff now to start doing
No,
that, there's no reason for
Well,
that.
that's the consultants
We need
can
to
do that.
move forward. We have it released. We're waiting for responses to that RFP, and we're ready to get started.
Right.
So what do you think is the time frame on that?
It's going to take a year.
Okay,
it's gonna
so
take a
within
good
that
part of
year's
the year.
time, we use this?
Correct.
Is that what we're
That's why
agreeing?
this, yeah, exactly. That's why this
Okay.
was submitted to you all, that in the interim for 2015, this is our measuring tool. And then in 2016, we will use the tool that is prepared and created for us for going forward.
All right, so do you need any further authorization from us to pull the trigger on this?
No, I
And-
mean, you all froze the increases. I'm asking you to release those so I can have the department heads start evaluating their
Can't vote on that, but I would-
staff.
We need to vote on, do we need to put that on the, vote on, make that an agenda item of
Yes,
the meeting?
I would,
We'll amend the agenda tonight.
right.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
All right. Number 6.
Okay, number 6. This is something that Councilmember Williams has been working on for a number of months. She shared this with you back in the fall, mid-fall, that we were looking at, and this is part of the work program that came out of the comprehensive plan on, as well as our Beaufort Highway Improvement Plan, gateway features, markers, indicators, so that people will know that when they cross the threshold inside the city limits, that there is a marquee of some sort. And in the sign industry, they talk about families of signs, so it's not just the gateway signage, but it's also the directional signs, it's the park signs, so there is uniformity in the design. Councilmember Williams and I had a meeting last week to get an update on where the consulting team, the designers are, and we have some great pictures to show you that I will say is the beginning of the designing that's starting to evolve. So, and I'll let Councilmember Williams take it from here.
We really only had 2 meetings with Sky Design, and the first one was to show us just a whole lot of different designs, and we'd either go thumbs up, thumbs down on them. We tended to stress to them that we embrace the sort of historic Brookhaven traditional look in our city, but we also recognize we're a new city, we're a hip city, we're a city of millennials, and so there's this modern element as well. They've come back to us with 3 very preliminary conceptual ideas, and they've tried to incorporate both this combination of traditional and hip, if you will. The other thing that they've taken into account, which you should be aware of, is they've gone around our city, and as we've marked where the gateways are and where we would put some of these entrance features, we have pretty narrow right-of-ways. We don't have a lot of horizontal space, if you will, and so they've tended to go with these designs that are more vertical, upright. So I think this first one you're looking at, you'll see that and I think it's on all of them, that can you see it where the writing is to Brookhaven goes up and down?
Yes.
And Maria and I kind of looked at that and said, is that readable? And does that
Kinda.
seem weird? And
Yeah.
ultimately, we decided, and then we debated whether the writing should go, the B should be at the top and it should go down.
Right.
But they assured us that really, when you read, your eye reads like from the bottom to the top.
Right.
So this little round element at the top is very much like what you see in historic Brookhaven and Oglethorpe. They've put a little doodad up there, whether it's the seal or some other.
Where's our seal, by the way? How long, what's been going on with that?
We've actually kind of signed off on a seal that Susan looked at it because we want to make sure that when she punches the proclamations and things.
But can we see that? Is that with this?
That's not with this
It's not
set,
here.
no, but we can
could-
send it out to you.
We can send it to you.
Please.
Okay, so you can see this first one is really, they're quite tall. I mean, what did they tell us, 18 to 20 feet high? That seems pretty high to me.
It looks, I like it. I mean, it's a good start. I just think it almost looks like a outdoor
You
mall.
get this kind of wrought iron
Right.
look with this little filigree and this little, I don't know the correct terms for it. And all of them, they've put them on some kind of a stone
Pedestal,
base. We've talked about whether we continue the granite that we have throughout our city with our granite curbs and our granite signs that are already in our parks, that gray granite, or whether we went to more of a lighter stone or something. That's all up for grabs. And none of these are in color or whatever, so that's yet to be, that's still to come. So can we go to the next one? So these are then, as Marie said, in the family of the signs. So you want to have it consistent throughout the city, whether the first one is your big gateway sign, your other, so say that one goes on Peachtree, and then your next one is maybe one that goes on, secondary road would be like Johnson Ferry. And then your other signs are like maybe along Peachtree Street. And then you've got your wayfinding signs that will say library this way, Town Brookhaven that way, Oglethorpe University.
One thing about the vertical lettering, I think they're right that your eye does that when you're reading from that way, but if you make the letters face you rather than being sideways, you could start with a B at the top. Rather than having it, they're making you turn your head to read it, you could start with the B at the top if you had it upright Brookhaven.
Oh, that's an idea.
This doesn't make any sense to make you turn your head like that, just so you can say you have to read left to right. Just read up and down, because your name will be, if the letters are right side up, then you don't have to worry about it.
You know, we didn't talk about that with them. Okay, we can take that back to them. All right, next one. This one, we kind of thought looked like a lighthouse, but it could be pretty cool. And again, it could be more of a stone column with, could even be a gas light or some kind of a light feature on top. Again, it's got some of the wrought iron features to it, and the indentation, let me see, I can't see that.
The name is
No,
so
that
small.
one to me is would be better, what you're talking about, Mayor, where it would read up and down instead of having to turn your head. So that's an idea. Let's go to the next one. And again, sort of the whole family of that kind of a sign. Could be very stately, could be very distinctive. Probably more expensive because it would be more stone. What was the idea on this one? This was more of a,
Bad.
French cafe. This is-
It's more contemporary
menu.
mixed with some traditional base.
yeah.
Looks like a sandwich board.
Trying to affect the design of a column, but it's actually two poles with the filigree in the middle.
Great for an artist community.
Looks pretty arty.
Yeah.
And let's see the next one. And then sort of that kind of a family. Again, what's it? All the writing that way. Unless, like in the first one, was probably their attempt to put the writing more horizontal.
Or is that the logo?
Well, it could affect the logo, yeah.
It looks like the actual Brookhaven Wave logo.
Yeah, can you go back to that one?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can give you my short synopsis on the,
So that's all three of them, is that right? Yeah, okay. I think we just wanted to hear, initial impressions, feedback, some other direction we might give them.
I think on the number two, if you go back to number two, the name in the middle, number two,
page 3
page 3.
or 4.
I mean, if the name was a more prominent feature, first of all, you'd save on stone. If it was a lot longer and bigger, the name is more similar. If you had it similar to the way the first one was, a longer one, I think it'd be nicer. I do like the idea of a gas light at the top. That'd be kind of interesting, and maybe a combination between 1 and 2. I don't know. I think 1 and 2 are the best if you can change the way the letters are put on
Yeah.
there.
I love the idea of a gas lamp. Our our friends at, we have to leverage our relationships with the gas marketers to see if we could get some lines run to those things. Option 1, while I think it's a nice look, reminds me a lot of an old-fashioned filling station pump. You've got your,
Esso used to have.
it's an Esso tank, and I just don't know is that our seal at the top that we haven't
I
created-
think it's just an artist's doodle in there right now as to sort of to be determined.
Or that's the light that lights up when you hit the sledgehammer and you get all the way to the top. So, but I love I think you know me, I'm very traditional. I like the classic look of number 2.
Yeah, I do too. It's if the name were bigger in the middle, I think that would be nicer.
My 2 cents are is that we certainly get as much citizen buy-in as we can get. I think if we can, I know that can be a tedious task and and lengthen and add to the cost of the process, but it's important. This really is a monument that should be a 50-year monument.
And they
if
would
not
like to
longer.
have some up this year,
Yeah.
by the summertime.
Be great to, somehow figure out how to get those engagements with the public and get some feedback.
I
But it's a great
suspect it's
start.
fairly easy to put them on the web
Right.
and even
Mhm.
have people vote on them. Remember, that's what we did with the logo.
Right.
And we can put them out in other
Can
ways.
we,
too.
when are they coming back, or when can we communicate with them, just, thoughts or suggestions with them?
So just, I'm gathering comments now. Joe, John, do you want to add your 2 cents?
I think as long as it's consistent.
Yeah.
And it, it conveys a brand. I think 2 looks good. I don't think it's so important to be able to read it per se. I think people will see it every day and they'll just kind of remind them where they are. And as long as it maintains a certain level of, how do I say this? I don't want to say style, but as long as it's not too loud and it's just kind of
Panache.
says Brookhaven.
Classy.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. And also built, designed in such a way that when cars hit it, because they will, that it's easily repaired and/or will not need to be repaired. Like,
Well, that'd be covered by the automotive insurance company, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If somebody runs into our monument, they're responsible for
They're
rebuilding.
responsible,
Do we have
yes.
coverage on these monuments, uninsured motors coverage?
No, if they run into it and destroy it, just like a light pole, Georgia Power pole, their insurance pays. We don't pay for it.
I like number 2. I just wish the name was bigger and the letters were right side up. Like the section that's carved out in the middle,
Yeah.
if it went longer down and
Light it up with gas.
right at the top of it, some
One
kind
of
of
the
gas.
Olympic torch coming out of the top.
I guess the test for me is, can you put it on a T-shirt? And if you can, then it's good.
Yeah, right, because, these are going to be signature designs that people will recognize Brookhaven with this design. The next step is really to color these renderings, and I think it'll give you a better sense, and then to locate them. There's another part of this package that does a site plan, meaning site vision, like where the sign would be, and Sky Design showed actual streets in the city, so you could really get a look. So we can go back and instruct them to add color to this. And
What do you have, like 5 or 6 monument signs in the city?
Yeah, and some of it's,
gateway entrances
Yeah.
for
And
the,
Yeah,
then
and some
smaller
of-
versions for little areas.
once they come up with the design, then they put it out for bid for fabrication, and then we start looking at the cost. And so I think at some point, it becomes how many can we afford?
right.
And it could be that we don't do them all in 1 year, it
Be 1 year
it could
for the
be
next.
over a period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, it's interesting to me that Dunwoody has yet to do gateway signs. I'm not sure Sandy Springs has, they've got signs on their parks, but they don't have any really significant signs. So, and then, if you saw in that new mixed-use development that was just announced in Chamblee, one of the things that developer is doing is putting this big, like, neon Chamblee sign across the top that looks like Pike's Market in Seattle.
Oh, really?
It's kind of a signature look of that.
Susan, can we see the second portion of number 2, like what the smaller versions would?
Kathy?
Kathy, the smaller versions of those,
It's the next slide,
the next slide. No, the next.
the other way.
There.
go.
Yeah.
So, for a park, would a park sign be one like the far right there or something like that? Or,
Well, it could be, or it could be more horizontal.
right?
One of the constraints that we have here in the city is, the right-of-way, and that's why you're seeing more of a vertical
Right.
look in the signs, because we can't go horizontal for like 50 feet on a sign, but in our parks, at our entrances, we could. So we can talk with them about that, but
The variation on that's sideways, I guess.
correct,
right?
yeah, but like the one that's second to the last,
Yeah,
I think that would be more of the the park sign as far as scale, but, you could turn that over and go
two
vertical and
small
then
ones and
have the columns at
put
the
the
end
sign
of
in
the,
there.
at each end, but we can direct them to.
Do y'all
to do
think
that
that the
too.
size of that first one is, I mean, do we need to have it that big? Is it, or this, I mean,
That seems awfully big to
yeah,
me.
the second one seems like it might be more appropriate.
Well, we want to look too as to where these will go and what the zoning of the area is, because
Right.
we don't want to exceed our height
Right.
requirements. So we want to abide by our own
But
ordinances.
that 20-foot is what a billboard is, so,
Right.
we may want to bring that
Yeah.
down. On the other hand, like Marie said, you want to be able to see it. Do you have any preferences in terms of the stone?
I think granite, not haphazard granite, but,
The gray
Should be a
granite
native
stone?
Georgia stone.
Do you like the granite that we have on our streets and in our parks right now, that kind of,
well, that granite that the cab used is kind of,
pretty gray?
it is gray, but I mean, I
Ordinances do
don't
have-
mind what shade of gray. It's just it's kind of, the stone pattern is kind of 60s-ish. It's like
Okay.
big, small, I'd like something a little more uniform, in whatever shade of gray, but just as long as it's more refined.
Okay.
I actually think that the tall monument is a good gatekeeper entrance. I mean, you think about any place that, is in the business to try and win you over from an entrance standpoint, it has a commanding presence. And, picture yourself going into Disney World, you've got the Magic Kingdom. I mean, you are coming into, well, they do that for a reason. I mean, you get excited. And I think our citizens are excited when they get back to Brookhaven. They're certainly proud of it.
But speakeasies don't even have a sign. And a lot of people want to go to a speakeasy.
Well, that's a different reason. But I think it can look intimidating when you just picture it next to one person standing there. But most monuments of real impact in history are big statuesque monuments.
That guy looks like a skateboarder, too. We need to have some
Yeah.
kind of suit or something. Looking up at that.
And remember too, this is just showing the sign and not what the built environment is around it.
Right.
So
I think you look at it in the right context. And
I think it's good, though. I think y'all did a good job so far, so I think it's not like how much we went over with our logo. I think this is a great,
Good. So are we hearing option two is what you're leaning more
just
towards?
with some modifications, I think.
Okay, well, why don't we'll go back and get them to color it up and then to locate them
longer.
for actual, photos that they can insert that, so you get a real idea, a streetscape of how that would work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Rebecca, first, thanks for taking the lead on this. And
I must tell you, it's actually been a little frustrating, and we lost one of the designers along the way, so to me, we're kind of behind, but
well, I mean,
but we're moving forward.
it's a good first step here. So am I correct in assuming that what we're looking at this is the result of a filtered process, right?
One other meeting.
Okay, I'm just saying that there were like multiple ideas and then kind of like
Right.
consensus was these were the best. Okay. I like number two. I like it with the gas light. I don't think it would be appropriate at this time to say don't use the big one. Would be best to see it in a street setting, which I think they're prepared to do, and/or with colorization to it. I want to throw something out to you, because this is the first conversation we're really having as a group on this issue, is that there is a project that is in developmental phase for presentation to the city, which is going to be at East Roxborough on North Druid Hills Road, which prior to annexation was considered to be a gateway to the city. And in the process of moving forward with this, one of the criteria I've set, or that has been offered, I didn't set it, is that the whole front end of the North Druid Hills Road and the East Roxborough frontage would be given to the city for a gateway entrance. And I presented this idea to a couple of HOAs when I was talking, just to get some feedback. And the consensus was to put in something of a fairly large stature, like the first one, only in a monumental wall taking up the entire corner. So although we're looking at this and we're looking at it in the form of a family, I would like to be, I would like to just throw out there, I'd like to keep it open where we can work within this theme, maybe somewhat on a more grandiose scale where it is appropriate, because the concept as it came back was, it would be a great place to put almost like a clock tower, similar to what that is, only with a clock tower and temperature gauge and maybe announcements, and have it be like our Big Chicken. When people say, you know, I'll meet you at the Big Chicken, you know exactly where you're going. If you're in New York City, they say, I'll meet you under the clock, you know you're going to Grand Central Station. Okay, this could be a place, something of a little bit more grandiose than just a column. So I'd like to make sure that you're hearing this for the first time, because we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this. And now we're moving forward with what could be gateway presence for us, but I'm hoping that we don't limit it when we have an opportunity to do something a little bit more expansive.
I mean, I guess you could throw that in with, you could have a wall behind it or something, you know, anything.
Well, I could see the wall with two of the shorter ones at the end, which would keep the theme consistent. I personally like the idea of doing something a little more stately in that corner, a little bit more, higher utility for all the traffic that passes there, something of value rather than just a cement wall. Okay, just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Will you let us know in the next meeting, maybe we can have a work session or something next time, or
Sure.
just, all right? Number
7.
7?
Council members were asking about a particular case that is in our courts right now, and the subject of it is the idea of a mobile car wash and the permissibility of it. While I'm going to recommend to you all not to discuss the case because it is before the judge, I think what I heard some of you saying is that you wanted to discuss the idea of this particular use, this kind of use, and, where could it be permissible or should it be permissible? And I think, even to discuss in a little bit more detail, what is a mobile business, a temporary business, a sporadic business, or a business that uses parking lots on a consistent basis, and what really trips them over to become a business that has regular hours and a customer base. So with that, we'll go into the discussion of it.
I have one quick comment about the agenda, real quick. For Kathy and Susan, when we have a discussion item, if we could attach either, like, it would be nice for number 7 to have the actual ordinance on this so we could look at it. Same with the signs, if we could have it, be able to pull it on a computer, and then with the discussion of the employee form. If we could just make sure that we have the documents attached to the agenda, because the agenda printout doesn't give you anything. When I click on that, it just says what we already know. So if we could make sure that we do that in the future, it'd be great to have any of these items that we're discussing, any documentation at all, we can look at them. All right, go.
Okay.
Well, I guess to start, I remember reading in this that we won't talk about the particulars of the case, but apparently prior to this situation, this particular mobile business was in compliance with not only the cab ordinances at the time, but also I read Atlanta. I don't know why Atlanta would have been in there, but I think it said that they was in compliance with some requirement by Atlanta. Do we know what those requirements were?
No.
No, I mean, we
No.
cannot confirm necessarily if they were in compliance specifically with any ordinance associated with DeKalb County at that time. Obviously, the information that we do have is the information that's been shared by the person of interest associated with this issue. Beyond that, we haven't found anything associated with any documentation from DeKalb County's end that would legitimize the specific use on the property, except for the fact that they were given permission from the development.
We do not have a current ordinance in place that would address this, and this is why we're having the legal issue.
In terms of the zoning ordinance, there are specific zoning districts that allow for what is referred to as wash services, automobile wash services. In terms of, if we're looking at specific zoning, the zoning itself is acceptable in that the area is Zone M, which is for industrial. So the type of use per se would be acceptable. It comes down to the fact of what do we deem as possibly a mole vendor, or what do you deem as sort of a consistent presence at a certain location that would require them to comply with the requirements of your typical brick and mortar service associated with car washes.
I guess anything that was attached, if there was something left overnight or over the weekend that's got brought back,
Yeah, possibly. I mean, to be honest with you, right now, it's just, there's some information that we received from the person of interest. There's some information that I've received separately. But, we do have in our regs, and again, this is adoption from DeKalb County, we did not add anything specific to car washes. It states that, wastewater from all automobile wash services shall drain directly into the public sanitary sewer unless otherwise approved by DeKalb County Health Department. It's just an assumption at this point that it may and may not flow in directly into a public sanitary sewer. We don't necessarily have that information. All that I'm aware of is it was a mobile vendor. I don't necessarily have the details as to tell you if it's, if it used water or if it did not use water, because there are certain services that do that. Additional information that I have received associated with this particular case is that the gentleman has had a presence at that location for about 11 to 13 years, has consistently been located at that location for 2 to 3 days out of the week, in addition to on-call services. So it comes down to where do we sort of create that line of a temporary service compared to a legitimate location or a consistent location, similar to how we treat a business that's within a strip center.
So this person was cited for what?
He was cited for not having a business license. We confirmed that with the clerk this evening.
Yes, and I do have a
So
copy
he
of
doesn't
that
have any
citation.
kind of a Brookhaven business license?
He has no business license, and, you're dealing, you're kind of looking at it in a zoning ordinance, and you're looking at somebody who's sort of set up shop for a period of time, consistently has done so. And just, these are my observations as far as mobile vendors, is where do you, like he says, where do you draw the line? You have plumbers, who do their services mobile-wise.
Do you require the food trucks to have a Brookhaven business
That's
license?
We
different
do.
because you got food.
But we do require.
Yeah, but they require a food truck.
For each food truck?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
That's
And
per-
at farmers markets, I
Correct.
believe.
And
we
now, that's
also
what I was going to get
require.
into. Chapter 15, which regulates the requirement of occupational tax, it allows for a certain duration in terms of the period of how long you can have a temporary business. Typically speaking, for like a special event where you may have, it's a little bit different from our food truck event. But if it was a special event that was catered by a private entity and they wanted to have sort of like a seasonal sales, let's say, then yes, they're allowed up to 10 business days per the occupational tax. The zoning has a different duration. It could be longer than that. But those are very specific to.
So if they have less than 10 days, they don't need to get a license. If they do more than 10, they need to get a
Well,
license.
no. They need a license period, but it lasts for a 10-day duration. This is from Chapter 15. They need a business license regardless.
What would a business license for a business like this cost?
$100.
Yeah, I believe the flat fee is $125.
So what about landscapers?
Well, that's the other thing, is sort of where do you make that distinction? Where do you make that distinction? Because our practice has been sort of similar to taxi cabs, without getting into the details, is sort of, if they're not permitted to solicit for business within the city, they are more than welcome to come in and actually pick up a client and drive out or drop off. Generally speaking, what we allowed was if they have a business license outside of the city, then we recognize that fact.
Right.
So for instance, landscapers, groomers, they're welcome to come in. They legitimately have a location
Because
outside of the city.
they're invited to.
Correct.
So my understanding, this fellow was invited by the complex too. But does he have any business license, do we know?
No, not that I know of, not in the city. I've looked up the Georgia Secretary of State. It appears that he does have an LLC. The address that's listed, obviously, is a residential address within the city of Atlanta.
Okay.
So I haven't confirmed with, the city, if he has a legitimate business license or not. That one aspect, yes, it appears that he is somewhat invited, but also there, from the tone of the email, it also seems like he has had a consistent presence at that location. So where is that sort of?
So you did not
fine line?
confirm that he had a business license in Atlanta, you just said, right?
I have not had the
Okay,
chance to confirm that.
So if he had a business license in Atlanta, would that give him visitation rights in Brookhaven?
Well, I think that's
Up to
sort of,
us.
it's up for discussion.
I mean, wouldn't that be the same as the taxi cab or
Can-
the
excuse me.
landscaper?
We
Well, I
really
think
shouldn't
the
be
distinction that we're
getting
trying
into
to.
this. The attorneys are saying we should not get into this level of detail on the specific use. What we need to talk about is how do we handle temporary businesses? And what constitutes a temporary business or a business that's fixed without a structure that utilizes a parking lot or a park or something of that nature. And I think, before, we can't try this case. They've been issued a citation for operating without a business license. It's apparent that uses such as this, if it's a mobile car wash, even if it's a landscape company that's coming in, and I'm sure you all have observed this, where they have their blowers and they're cutting the lawn, and the next thing you see is they're blowing the leaves and the grass clippings, and they go right into the catch basin. Everything that enters that catch basin ultimately goes to our rivers, our creeks, our streams, and our rivers, and ultimately our drinking source. So I think what we have, is an issue where I think we can have community development come back and offer some definitions of what, constitutes a business, what constitutes a temporary business, and what is the criteria to make that temporary business legal. What's been described in this example is we have a business that has no structure and is utilizing the property of others and emptying the waste of the water into the storm sewer. That's what's being observed.
Right, that could be a potential issue. The other
I
aspect
thought you
was.
said you didn't know if it was going into the
Well,
store.
that may be a potential issue because we do not know exactly based upon the life of that property, the development. It's an older development, obviously, so we don't necessarily know if it is going into the public sewer or if it's going to stormwater. The other aspect of the initial sort of discussion associated with this was based upon the fact of, I understand we heard arguments about landscapers and so forth, but is it incidental to the use that's already existing, the primary use that's there? Typically, we would say landscapers that are, trimming the hedges, cutting their lawns, is associated with the primary use of a home.
I would think that we would, for something like this, he's invited by the property owner, but a business license, either in a city or in our city, I think should probably be required. I don't know that making it very expensive is I think it's $50 to $75 might be on this type of business. I'd say landscapers, car detailers, a whole class of people that I think that the business license should be reasonable. But whether or not this case, I'm not comfortable us prosecuting a guy when we don't have a clear understanding ourselves. But
If it's not your permanent place of business or even a temporary place of business,
right.
then I don't believe you're in a position for you to license them. I mean, that's.
Well, he was just
Unless
saying
it's
earlier that.
it's-
But we
no.
do this with our food trucks
But
and with
that's
farmers.
that's a special event.
That's a
There's
special event for-
safety issues, there's
Recurring.
food issues.
There's certain categories, and again, the food truck is a little bit different in that it's a city-sponsored event. But we have specific categories, not to get into the details of different types of events that we do have. There are categories that are already established under Chapter 15 that states those businesses that require an occupational tax and those that do not. So, again, it's up for discussion as to how you want to proceed, but the other aspect.
I just think a license, like you mentioned earlier, from any jurisdiction, if they're mobile in particular, I think should not be a requirement.
Well, yes, but now we're getting to sort of the larger aspect of zoning. So we regulate the use that are associated based upon zoning that are permitted. There are special exceptions. Obviously, we have administrative permits, special event permits, and so forth, but those are limited in duration.
Right.
And those are controlled to the number of times that we could hold those events in a calendar year. But, it gets into sort of, if we allow someone to get a license to proceed on somewhat of a permanent basis, again, where do we start requiring them to meet all those development standards that may be typical of a legitimate car wash that wants to locate within a legitimate zoning district, without making exceptions? So this is definitely a broader sort of discussion that we need to have. I don't necessarily think that we could come to a conclusion at this point.
Well, that's what the purpose is to have the
Sure.
discussion about it, and I think, I just don't like the fact that if we don't have a clear understanding ourselves of what is required, we shouldn't be giving tickets to people. That's my only issue, and that's part of this discussion. Without getting the specifics of the case, that's just what I think. I would leave it up to staff to kind of give us a recommendation on what they think as far as, how to handle a situation like this in the future. I think that would be important, and taking into consideration that I think there's a difference between somebody who's invited onto a property rather than somebody who's just setting up, anywhere.
Sure.
And, and depending on what their use is, like you're saying, if it's a detailer, I mean, they're not using a lot of water sometimes because you're just doing the inside or just doing a quick wash, but I don't know.
I think what you're saying, and why don't you allow us the opportunity to come back and offer some definitions that then establish criteria.
Sure.
Because here's the difference. If the use is invited onto a property, then there's certain criteria. I mean, does it conform to the zoning for which the use is located? Is it a fixed business, or is it a business that's out in the open? Are there certain environmental requirements, health requirements that have to go along with that use to offer to the city that whatever they're doing, it's protected? I mean, we don't want a business of any nature going in that's going to put chemicals into our storm sewer. So, we have to identify define what types of businesses are temporary in nature or perhaps don't need brick and mortar. And, so if that is the case, then how do they get a license? And is it a temporary license? Temporary is, it could be recurring once a week, but if they're there 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I think that puts whatever kind of use that is, whether it's selling vegetables and fruit in a stand, or if it's selling sandwiches, in an office park, that's consistent, that the customers themselves there can rely on a certain time that use is going to occur. I think we need to define those types of businesses, and why don't we do that, and staff can come up with
All right.
some definitions
Thank you.
to do that.
All right?
I would hope the thrust of that would be oriented towards not inhibiting free enterprise
I
as
do
much
too.
as possible. I mean, we learned that fantastic information at the event that was held back in October about how much of our business is actually the entrepreneurial business in Brookhaven, 99-point-something%. Blew me away when I found that out.
I would say to staff, just use free enterprise glasses when you're,
Right,
thinking
we
about
want to
the-
make, especially for, all right, I won't get into it because it's about the case.
all right. All right, next, discussion of city limits
Yes.
expansion.
Councilman Gebbia has been involved in this, along with Councilman Madison. I think you all had a couple of meetings with representatives from the city of Atlanta.
And John
regarding-
and Rebecca was next, but unfortunately the clock ran out till tonight.
Okay,
The objective was to get everybody involved.
right.
Go ahead.
But the idea is, there is a sense of time, and, there are other jurisdictions that are looking, and there's been interest by the community, and I think Mr. Gebbia can go to that. You all have maps
Yes, go ahead,
that show
Joe.
the current city limits, including the property that was just annexed last month. And then the other map shows the area of interest that would expand the borders of the city. Councilman Gebbia also asked me, which is provided on the copy of this map, that shows the anticipated city taxes that would be generated out of this property. So,
Joe?
Okay, a couple of things. You know, this whole city movement is going through a feverish pitch right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty that's going on. It pretty much all started with the 5-member state committee setting the borders for Tucker and for La Vista Hills. And those are non-negotiable boundaries. They are what they are. Our annexation of Choa and Executive Park, although we did not solicit that, came to us, does have an impact. I think the net effect of that, as we've proven, was not financially really stable for us to take it. From a financial standpoint, was probably a wash. But the bigger impact is going to be the move by Atlanta coming out. And what we found when we got into conversations with the folks at La Vista Park, and there's been more inquiry coming to us from the North Druid Hills Neighborhood Association and the Mary Hills about whether or not we have an appetite for annexing additional areas. What's causing a problem here is that the current understanding of the Atlanta annexation is splitting the school zone for the La Vista Park people, and it's causing, it's going to cause some significant disruptions in the educational process as it stands right now, as well as division of neighborhoods. When we talked to the folks at La Vista Park, the initial feedback that came back is their preference was to stay within whatever was going to keep the school district together. And that message got out, and apparently Atlanta has responded in kind and said, okay, we're prepared to annex within the attendance zone. Now, if that happens, that takes them right up to our border on Executive Park and Choa, and potentially takes them across, right up to Briar, to
Claremont.
over to, no, not quite. Takes them over North Druid Hills Road, and then right up on the northern side of Choa, pretty much where
It's
you see.
Claremont there.
It's all the way to Claremont.
Though that's what this shows.
Oh.
Okay, it doesn't go quite that far. And there's all kinds of ramifications that come from this. So the Atlanta mayor's office sent an emissary over to speak to Brookhaven, and they contacted me as the councilman for the 4th District, which is where this would fall into, and they came and presented this. Apparently to give us some forewarning what was coming on, and their intentions are to file a bill in this upcoming legislative session requesting annexation of this area. There's an impact that comes out of this, that if that annexation moves across Druid Hills, it's going to take the 2 schools that are there, even though they're not occupied. You've got the International School and the old Kitteridge School. And one of those schools is up for sale within the DeKalb County system. And I don't know what the amount was. I had heard through a hallway conversation, $50 million. I don't know if that's true or not. I'll say that openly. But if this moves across, those schools then become the property of APS, Atlanta Public School System. And that would be a potentially lost revenue generator for the DeKalb County schools.
Well, what does DeKalb County have to say about this?
I haven't gotten a response from
I
DeKalb
mean,
County at this point.
Across county line annexation requires a lot more than just the kind of annexation we did. And it requires permission from the subject county. I mean, unless you can shove a bill to the legislature saying, we're going to take this DeKalb County property and DeKalb can shove it, I think it's a lot more difficult to, I know it's a lot more difficult because we had the discussions, Marie, on the parcel on Peachtree about that little
Correct.
1 acre parcel, what was involved in us annexing that one piece of property that was in the city of Atlanta. And it's not some, we'll file a bill and do it.
Correct.
It's a lot more involved. So I don't know what their city of Atlanta is intending to do, but I would say that there would be a huge fight, issue, legal problem with saying we're just going to annex a property in DeKalb County and take the DeKalb County school buildings. And only reason I'm saying this is because I don't have, other than what we committed to in the beginning when we were annexing Executive Park and Choa, which was if there are petitions submitted by surrounding neighborhoods for annexation into the city of Brookhaven, we have a duty to consider them, and we should consider them.
And we've had open conversations with them.
Right, and they've spoken to me as well, and the impression I got was that they didn't have any, that we were third on the list. Their first preference was not incorporating anywhere, and the
Right.
second was
Staying with the school system.
City of Atlanta or school system, and then the new city of La Vista Hills, and then us. So I don't want to give the people of Brookhaven or anybody else the wrong impression that we're considering this map here as we're going to start annexing. I think our annexations are done for the time being, and I don't speak for everybody, but I think that I appreciate what you're doing and keeping us informed of this, because we have to be aware of what City of Atlanta is proposing and what is possible. And I just want to say that I don't have any desire to go through any more annexations anywhere in the near future, especially during this legislative session. I just don't think it's something that our taxpayers want us to do, and I just don't, not to throw water on what you've done here. I'm just telling you, that's my opinion.
I'm not making a proposal that we go either way, just
Right.
presenting the information. and-
But you understand, people are going to, well, I want to explain clearly to the camera that I don't have any inclination to pursue any more annexations anytime near in the future. But
You know,
this is a good information for us to have, absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
J-Max, the issue I think that we have to, the exercise that we have to go through is evaluating the potential outcomes of this legislative session. And we know this is one that Atlanta is pushing. We also know La Vista Hills is interested in everything north of Druid Hills, so basically half of this map. You know, and I think that the city, because these potential annexations of in one case an incorporation, in the other case the annexation by Atlanta,
Well, this
will
whole,
affect.
this whole area here is in La Vista Hills map, not just
Yes,
half
it
of
is.
it.
This is all
Okay.
La Vista
All right.
Hills map
So-
right now.
That's
So
the
I think
first
that,
thing.
I think that one of those, you know, those two options will have different effects to the city of Brookhaven. In one case, I contend that if the city of Atlanta were to annex it, there would be potentially some devastating effects of loss of school tax revenue from a high resource area. If this is incorporated in La Vista Hills, that wouldn't be the case. And so I do think that we as a city should weigh in on this to the extent that it affects the city of Brookhaven taxpayers, because
Well, as a
we-
DeKalb County resident, I would say
Yeah,
I'll be in
and a-
favor,
and a
I'll be
DeKalb
in
County.
favor of staying in DeKalb County and going into La Vista Hills.
Right, right. And I think that that's important for us to,
I think we
To-
all should agree that, I mean, do we all?
That doesn't deny, though, that there is a move afoot from Atlanta.
I'd like
Now-
to see a bill, to me, it sounds a little crazy that they could think they could, you know.
I mean, there's serious.
Oh, yeah, I know they got a lot of wampum and power,
Yeah.
but I just don't, the fight that you will get over taking that
Right.
much property from another county and school buildings is monumental. And I don't think I know people have been talking about it, but the scenario you suggested, Joe, which is a very real, I mean, if they took it with all the school buildings and the school for sale, I just don't, there'd be a revolution probably.
A lot of lawyers make a lot of money on that one. A lot of lobbyists and a lot of lawyers.
My understanding is that there is a sponsor for the bill.
Have we seen what it was going to look like?
No, and that's happened, I believe that's going to happen here very soon, because it's just, the legislative session just opened. So we need, I'm interested in sharing this conversation in an open conversation,
Sure.
just to make sure that we're aware of what's going on, because I've predicted that this is going, I think a lot of people haven't been paying attention to what's been going on. Now that it's at their front door, it's like, wow, everybody's opening their eyes and saying, what the heck is going on?
Right.
And it's going to enter a frenzy period of time here. And we just need to know what's going on, because everything is coming right up to us.
Right.
And there may be demands made on us, there may be requests made on us, and we need to be prepared by knowing the information. And that's all
why
I'm trying to do
I
here.
appreciate that, and that's why I said that before. Thank you for
So,
keeping us.
Joe,
informed.
I had a question for you.
I just want to make sure we're clear that what you're giving us is information.
Right,
not
this
a
is just
city
an open
plan.
conversation to say
Right.
what's going on situational-wise.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
So, Joe, what would be the advantage of us taking this area that you've outlined here?
Oh, I'm not suggesting we take it. I'm just saying I'm having people from different neighborhoods all along this way call me and say, is Brookhaven interested? Do they have an appetite? Because they're going to be asked to state a position of what their priorities are, whether they want to go first for unincorporated, whether they want to be considered for annexation into Brookhaven, whether they want to be considered annexation into Atlanta. I mean, these folks are having their community meetings, and they're trying to position themselves. And they're asking me, how does your council feel about this? So I'm just presenting the information to you and letting you know that
Yeah, and I also, I think it's important for us to look at taking it one step further in clearly expressing our wishes to the legislature who's going to be looking at this, because there's the potential that these lines will be drawn by the legislature this year. And if we sit back and don't express an opinion about it, then, the legislature may not, they may decide, well, we're just going to give it all to Atlanta, or we're going to give all this to La Vista Hills. And,
I mean, I think that makes sense, but on the other hand, too, what people need to realize in these areas, that if they want to control their own destiny, they've got to, to get off the stick and do something for themselves.
Right.
And, I think we've got our boundaries, and I think they should stay that way for the time being, unless there are some groundswell of people that want to come into the city of Brookhaven near our annexations, our recent annexations. But these people can express what they want to do, and we've told them time and time again that if they want to come into the city, they have to apply. And
and I think that, the important things that I think we'd all like to see further municipalization of DeKalb County adjacent to our borders. I think that La Vista Hills would provide good services to this whole area. I do have concerns about the school system, and that's the one that worries me most. If there is, but I also think that the city of Atlanta is reaching out and saying, look, we want to know what your concerns are, and if they can figure out a way that they, leave out the schools in some way and leave those as DeKalb County schools, well, that's something that we might want to express to them, that's very important for us to have.
Well, to tell them what I think, I would just say, I wouldn't want you to do anything that would interfere with the possible municipalization of this area as a DeKalb County city. I think
Right.
that's where our loyalties, and that's where my loyalty is first. And,
Yeah.
if people want to get out and go into Atlanta, that's their own initiative. I just want to be careful that we were, told, and from when we were doing our Executive Park Choa annexation, there was a lot of talk in the beginning about, you're going to hurt La Vista Hills, or,
Right.
well, this could kill La Vista Hills.
Yeah.
So I don't, I think they need to be told that. So somebody needs to be telling that to
Right.
the city of Atlanta and to the people here in this map.
Right.
The only caveat I would add is, we did tell the residents who are adjacent to the Choa and Executive Parks that if you wanted to come into our city, we would certainly consider that.
Yeah, we said that.
And,
yeah.
but the mayor's right. They need to initiate that discussion. And, we already have gone through the debate about whether the residents who live near these commercial properties should really be attached to them, having first and foremost interest in them and their future. So I still want to make sure that those residents in these nearby areas know that we're open to them coming into our city, but really, they need to initiate the process. I guess what I'm hearing is that Atlanta is kind of driving the train, and the train could just go ahead and leave the station without getting permission from everyone,
Yes.
around it. So I agree, we need to be in discussions with Atlanta. I'm glad that you're doing that, Joe, and be aware of our own Brookhaven interests. But I'm with the mayor, too. I think we want to support La Vista Hills and municipalization of DeKalb if we can. And there's already been one analysis that was published in the newspapers of what this would cost the DeKalb County schools, and it was significant. I mean, it was.
Right.
My vague memory on it was that it was like $50 million if
Well, it's
this took
DeKalb,
place.
it's DeKalb County also. This is.
Oh, the county, right.
Yeah, because, you're talking about,
The high resource tax area.
right.
What I'm not clear on is you'd still be Atlanta in DeKalb. You're not changing to Fulton County.
Correct.
You become part of the City of Atlanta school system, but I think you would still pay your county taxes to DeKalb.
It would be Atlanta Police, it would be Atlanta Fire, so.
Right,
you'd have that
right. So your
you'd have
city taxes,
You'd have that displacement of those employees.
and those are much higher, whatever.
I mean,
So it looks like if, the city, I don't know what their city taxes are, but if our bill is 94, if our if Brookhaven's tax bill of your total, the cab tax bill is 6%, then that extrapolates out to $10 million in property tax, non-school property tax, I guess, for DeKalb County in revenue, lost revenue, I guess. I don't know, that sounds like it might be right, but I don't know.
Yeah, of the total tax,
So
bill
600,000
divided
is
up.
what the city would get, then the DeKalb would be getting 10 million.
Yeah, the cab and the school board would
Yeah.
get 60 or 70% of that. All right.
94%, not 60. They'd be getting, this is 6% of $10 million.
Yeah,
So the remaining 94% would be the cab's revenue, whether it's school or.
right, right.
All right.
Well, I just wanted to bring this to your attention, and, it's unfortunate that we haven't had a chance to meet before this as a group to really start sharing it. But I'm anticipating that the information frenzy is going to continue here very quickly over the next couple of weeks, probably 3 to 4 weeks maximum, and whatever's going to happen is going to unfold over that period of time before the crossover day.
Well, to your and Bates's point, to our legislative delegation, and I guess we'll be having lunch with them soon.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I would just, my opinion, if y'all agree with me, let me know that we support the municipalization of that area as a DeKalb city first. And
Right.
if that
I
interferes
think
with-
that's got to be the highest priority.
Okay, all right. All right.
Let me make a suggestion to the agenda. I know that we had added an item to the regular meeting for the education presentation by basis. I'd ask that if we can move that to item number 9 in the work session. They have a commitment at 7 o'clock, and they wouldn't be able to make the presentation if we delay them until that regular session. Is that something we can do? Can we move them from the regular meeting to this work session?
How long will it take?
It's a 10-minute presentation max. It's just basis, so the reason this came up, Glenn Delk, who's assisting the city with our education initiatives, had invited a representative of Basis to Atlanta to talk about education in this area. Jonathan Gelbart is the manager of New Schools Development for Basis, and he's here on an exploratory mission to look at opportunities in Georgia. And Basis, just as an FYI, is, according to U.S. News and World Report, they have the number 2 and the number 5 ranked schools in the country. They are certainly one of the premier operators, if not the best charter school operator. And I'd like to invite Jonathan and Glenn. And Glenn, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Hold on, let's
Or
make
we
sure we're
need to make
okay.
a-
Make sure we're
Right.
okay. I don't know, we can't do a motion and.
Right. We're getting ready to start doing a preview of the regular council agenda.
We'll just move that
So we
to
could
the
just
start.
move that to the start, and then when we go to the regular council agenda, since we're going to amend it to allow for the 3% to be released, why don't we then also amend the agenda to remove that
Okay.
item?
So this will
That
take
way.
10 minutes, because we got to do a executive session after this, so that's why we moved everything back.
Right.
Yeah, and the reason that I wanted to invite him in here is I think Basis I'd like to hear about what they do, the impact they have on their community, and certainly for our education initiatives here, it's important for us to understand what else is out there in the marketplace.
All right, Mr. Gelpart?
How long will it take, do you think? We've gone a little bit. Right.
You want to push the button, turn that light green?
Also, I will tell you
There you
that
go.
this
Thank
was
you.
an unplanned request that I had that he present to council, so.
What a welcome
Thank you.
request.
So thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity. I've got a presentation that we're just pulling up here. But BASIS is a network of 16 charter schools across the United States. We have 13 schools throughout Arizona, 2 schools in San Antonio, Texas, 1 in Washington, D.C. And by various measures that I'll get into, we've been ranked as having some of the best public schools in the United States. And we're really proud of that, and we're looking to expand and offer that opportunity to as many other communities as we can. And here in Georgia, you all have relatively favorable laws for charter schools that would work for us. And that's actually very rare for our requirements. So that's why I'm here, looking at various areas around Atlanta to see if this would be a good fit for us.
Is this a part of what Edivate and what Glenn, I mean, I want to make sure I understand.
There's a possibility that BASIS could be involved with Brookhaven Innovation Academy. Certainly, it's something I'd love to explore.
Is that what this is for? It's for that purpose, right?
Not really. I mean, we
So this is something
haven't-
different than Brookhaven Innovation Academy?
No, it's this is really just an overview of what BASIS is and the impact they make on education. But they are a charter management operator
And a possible charter
and a possible
for BIA.
management
Well,
organization
if you
for
can speak to
Brookhaven
that, I
Innovation
just want to make
Academy.
sure, we're not
This is
doing too-
totally consistent with your initiative, because I asked them to come look at the Atlanta area, because they are probably the premier charter operator in the country, and they may wind up being a possibility to manage Brookhaven Innovation
Okay,
Academy.
all right.
And Jonathan can talk to you a little bit about who they are and where they are. I'll start by simply saying that their schools, we've had a couple of meetings today, and I kept saying that their schools outperformed Shanghai by 50 points in math and science. I would stand corrected. It's 150 points in math and science. So I think they provide a heck of an option for Brookhaven if you decide to
Would this
go.
help, would this enhance our application to the State Charter Commission?
Definitely.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So Glenn and I have been talking about the various options that we could partner together. In the other states where we operate, we have a charter direct from the state without partnership with the district, but it's certainly not something we're opposed to. So let me see if this is working. Great. Okay, so what is BASIS? BASIS is a network of open enrollment, tuition-free public charter schools. In Arizona, anyone who's a resident of Arizona can attend any of our schools, so there's no geographic boundary. Our mission is to raise the level of American education to match the highest international standards. So we hope to have an indirect effect on other schools around us by encouraging them to raise their standards. And our benchmark are the top performing schools in other countries, not even the top performing schools in this country. BASIS was started in 1998 when Michael and Olga Block, two economists, decided to start a new school for their daughter back when charter schools were just getting started, and they founded BASIS Tucson with 54 students. They continued to grow that, and they grew in notoriety until there was demand for a second school, so they opened BASIS Scottsdale in 2003. Scottsdale is a affluent suburb of Phoenix that's well-known for their good schools, and so the thought of the Blocks, the founders, was let's see if we can go to the best school in the district and still beat them. And so that's what they did. In 2010, Craig Barrett, the former CEO of Intel, joined us as chairman of the board on the condition that we continue opening new schools all over the country. I just pressed the wrong button. Okay. All around the country to as I mentioned, provide this opportunity to as many students as possible. And so that's part of why I'm here, scouting out opportunities. Subsequent to that, we went from 3 schools when he joined the board in 2010 to now 16, just over 4 years later. So we've undergone quite rapid expansion. In 2013, we opened our first K through 4 school. All of our schools before that had been for grades 5 through 12. So now we are a complete K-12 network. And in Atlanta, we'd probably start somewhere in the K-5, K-6 range and then grow up from there. So this is just a graph showing our total enrollment over time. You can see we've got more than 13,000 students expected by next school year. So we up from 54 in the first year. What makes BASIS different? How do we do what we do? There's really 3 pieces: teachers who are experts in their fields, high expectations, and emphasis on individual student responsibility. So number 1 means teachers who have degrees in their subjects. All our math teachers have math degrees. All our physics teachers have physics degrees, even if they're teaching 5th graders.
Different?
And that's different.
It's not an education degree, it's a degree.
Exactly, it's not an education degree.
And that's across the board. And so what that allows is it allows teachers to share their passion for their subject with the kids. And if the kids are ready for more advanced material, the teachers are prepared to provide that. High expectations means what it sounds, just pushing every kid to their maximum potential and ensuring that we're using international benchmarks, not just local benchmarks. And then the third is emphasis on individual student responsibility. We want the kids to take responsibility for their learning. We don't want them to be dependent on their parents to be pushed. We want them to really just own it and push themselves and see the value of what they're learning. And the way we do that is to provide a very high-quality educational product for them. How does BASIS perform? We've ranked in the top 10 of various national rankings since 2010, and actually earlier than that for our BASIS Tucson school, our first school. This past year, our BASIS Scottsdale school was ranked the second best high school in the United States. And our Tucson school was ranked 5th. Last year, Tucson was ranked 2nd and Scottsdale was ranked 5th. So it changes year to year, but we're doing pretty well. SAT scores, our schools are at or above the level of the top private boarding schools in the United States. You can see BASIS Scottsdale exceeding Phillips Exeter Academy, Andover, Harvard Westlake.
Was that ranking including private schools too? No.
The previous one does not include private schools,
but this
does.
All right.
And this is just SAT scores based on SAT scores that the private schools have chosen to publish. But you can see that we're doing this all with open enrollment campuses. There's no entrance exam, there's no GPA requirement, there's no tuition, there's nothing. Anyone can apply, it's just a lottery, and we've been able to get these results. The OECD network of advanced countries has an international standardized test called the PISA exam. If you've ever seen the headlines ranking the United States as 27th in the world for education or anything like that, that's based on the scores of this exam. And we had our kids take the exam, and if BASIS were its own country, we would be #1 in the world, beating Shanghai, Finland, all the others that you may have heard of, with the United States 400 points behind. So how does it really work? I'm just going to skip through this a little bit.
BASIS is not going to try to annex Brookhaven, are they?
Only if you want us to. So we have a complete K-12 program, as I mentioned. At the younger grades, it focuses more on developing love and respect for learning and moving on to college readiness. Actually, a graduation requirement of ours is that every kid get accepted to a 4-year college. They don't have to go, but we guide them through the college application process. We have a full-time class for them to do their applications and gain recommendations and tweak it, and so it's actually a requirement that they get accepted. And we've had kids with straight C's and D's in our schools get accepted to college because the colleges know how rigorous our program is. In kindergarten, you've got your various math, literacy, science. Our math program for the kindergartners actually starts with first grade level math, so we're starting ahead of the game right from day one. In the lower grades, humanities, math, and science are taught as one integrated block, so the students can understand the connections between those subjects. We teach Mandarin Chinese to encourage the kids to develop a new sense of thinking about language. Since it's a tonal language and also uses characters rather than alphabet, it really expands the kids' minds and forces them to think in new ways. We have a fine arts block, PE every day, a connections class, where the students do projects combining what they've learned in every other subject. And we actually also have 2 teachers per classroom in these grades, one who does have an education degree to handle the little kids and one with a degree in their subject. In the upper grades, we focus on well-rounded liberal arts. We have physics, chemistry, and biology, all 3 in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So by the time they get to high school for AP science, they've already had 3 years of that science. So they're way ahead of their peers. We have a course on formal logic and persuasion in 7th grade, teaching teenagers how to argue, which everybody really loves. Economics and AP World History in 8th grade.
Parents must really love you.
They love it. They love it. And the AP World History, the College Board actually doesn't let us call it AP World History for 8th grade. They don't permit AP classes below 9th grade, so we call it World History with an AP exam, optional, but almost all our kids take it, and 97% of all 8th graders in the entire world who took the World History exam were our kids. No one else does that. No one else has this program for 8th graders. So in the high school, it continues with an all AP program. Physics, calculus is a requirement, a graduation requirement, AP US history, government, you name it, AP foreign language. We have
What's a requirement you have to take?
calculus. Calculus
Every
is-
kid has to take?
Every kid has to take calculus to graduate.
My kids won't be doing that.
10 hours a week of English, language, and literature in 9th grade. And even with all these advanced classes, if the kids start with us in 5th grade or earlier, they can graduate by 11th grade if they so choose. 12th grade is a little different. It's optional for the kids. Most of them choose to stay because it's an independent research program. As I mentioned, acceptance to college is a graduation requirement. But in addition to that, we have post-AP courses that are dependent on the expertise of our faculty. So we've taught genetics, game theory, organic chemistry, which is fantastic for any kids thinking of going into pre-med. They can know that they really don't like organic chemistry before paying tuition for it. And then there's also the senior research project, and we've had kids go all over the country or abroad. They get a basis internal faculty mentor and an external mentor from industry, and they can do anything from creating an alphabet for an Indian language that never had an alphabet before, to writing a report on the history of technology and in American revolutions and wars, or you name it. It's cancer research. We have lots of great partnerships with hospitals and universities, and it's really an amazing program. So, extracurriculars, in addition to the academics, we have lots of extracurricular opportunities for the kids. Any sport you can think of, except for football. Don't do tackle football.
That's cross you out right there.
But we've got everything else. And here's just a view of what our typical schools look like. This is a rendering of our newest school that's going to be opening in the fall in the western Phoenix suburb city of Goodyear. And we actually were fortunate enough to partner with the city of Goodyear. They sold us a city-owned parcel of land and provided carryback financing, and are also handling the bulk of off-site construction work for the roads and things around this parcel. So we're really excited about that. We're going to have our groundbreaking for this one next month. And that's it. Here's my contact information, which I can share with all of you.
What was the average population per school? Attendance?
Average population per school ranges from 500 to 800.
Class size?
Class size is capped at 30.
There's
But
2 teachers per classroom?
2 teachers per classroom at the younger grades, so it's 15 to 1 ratio.
6th grade or 5th grade?
Through 4th grade.
4th grade?
I thought there was some interesting statistics in your, I guess, Flags, one of your first locations, you were telling me the demographics of that school, it was the third?
Right,
What-
yeah, our
I'm not sure which
basis-
school. Go
The
ahead.
Tucson school in central Tucson is about 30% Hispanic. Our school in DC is about 50% free and reduced lunch, so we have a pretty diverse group of kids.
And you're operating this on how much per year?
In Arizona, we get $6,500 a year per kid.
Is that typical?
Yeah, that's the state average.
What about the other states?
Well,
Texas is about the same, and DC is much higher.
The
But
one-
almost all the increase in DC goes to rent on our building.
The one difference is they just opened 2 private schools, one in Silicon Valley and one in Brooklyn, and they charge $25,000 a year. So if they come to Brookhaven, you'll be able to tell your residents that they can get a $25,000 a year education for free.
right. And in DeKalb County, we're paying around $9,000 per student if you averaged it across all of the grades. And then City of Atlanta pays how much, Glenn, per student on average?
14.
14,000.
DeKalb's 13.
Now, the cab's 9, J-Max.
No.
It was in the paper.
Unless they're,
We were second behind Atlanta, I thought, in expense.
Decatur, maybe. Did you mean Decatur?
All right. Extracurriculars, is there a program where if there's not a sport offered at your school that they can play at the local public school or the near public, I mean, in the attendance zone where they live, or?
We don't have a program like that right
What they do for
now.
homeschoolers sometimes?
I think the state is just beginning to look at that, J-Max. I don't believe we have it implemented yet, but in other states, they do allow you to do that. But I'm pretty sure that'll happen here in the next year or two.
What we do is everything is driven by the kids. It's about empowering the kids and removing obstacles. So if a kid comes to us and says, I really want to play rugby, and we don't have a rugby team, we tell them, okay, recruit 10 of your friends and find a teacher to supervise, and then you've got your rugby team. And that's the way we do
But
things.
tackle football, is it a bar? No.
Tackle football, the problem is the equipment is very expensive, we haven't
They can
found
provide
parents.
their own equipment or something, there's no philosophical, we're not gonna let you do, we'll let you do rugby, but not tackle football.
There's no philosophical objection to it, but we haven't had a critical mass of kids clamoring for it at this time.
Right.
Brookhaven, they'll partner with the Colts.
They're too busy with calculus.
Yeah, all right.
That's a great presentation, and I think for the citizens of Brookhaven, it's important to remind people, the Brookhaven Innovation Academy is a potential partner for BASIS. I think it would be, I'm very excited about the possibility that could happen, but it's, again, the decision of that governing board. And in Brookhaven, it's just this initiative is just one of several initiatives that we have in Brookhaven because we're dedicated to improving the opportunities in education for all of our citizens because it matters so much to economic
We haven't
development.
convinced them yet to come to Georgia.
Well,
so-
Basis Brookhaven sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds nice.
Did you see those monument signs?
That's what
There's a lot of reasons.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
we
so much.
appreciate it. We have so little time, Marie. Now we got to review the agenda.
Yes, okay. We have public hearings for Brookhaven Homes, RZ 14-16. Remember, this was deferred from your November 18th meeting. Ben, is there anything new that they need to know about?
Yeah, well, they submitted a revised site plan, but it's actually full of multiple deficiencies. Staff.
Can I have one, Mr. Gelbart?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sorry. Go ahead.
Staff would recommend that, well, we're going to go over this, but we'll recommend that it be deferred, remanded back to the Planning Commission for their meeting in March.
Right.
And I'll provide the date of the meeting during the hearing. But just, there's too many deficiencies that we have to go over. We have to probably meet with them before then,
Right.
and giving us enough time will be appropriate.
All right,
But they have downsized it quite a bit,
Well,
right?
yeah, technically they went from 42 to 36, now they're showing 29. They're still calling out townhouses, but if you look at the actual layout,
it
it
says
appears.
24.
Okay.
I'd heard 29, but I also heard 24, but then this says 24.
Okay, I'll double check on the actual site plan, but generally speaking, they're showing now detached products, but they're still calling it out townhomes on their site plan. So again, there's a lot more confusion here. The applicant could sort of chime in a little bit more, but at this point, it's not very clear what they're wanting to do, and we need more time to work with them.
Okay, got it. Next. Marie, number 2, that's the same thing.
Number 2 is related to number 1.
Same
All right,
thing.
so then we,
Okay, then we go to the consent agenda. Okay,
Gotcha.
meeting minutes, and then we're going to add the budget release for the 3%.
Okay.
So that'll be on there for consent.
all right,
Reports and presentations, we have the PCID coming for presentation for support by the city on a grant application that they're making. We'll amend the agenda to remove item number 2 now, since you've already heard that.
I want to remove item number 3, too. But we're doing all the appointments at another time.
Well, let's go ahead.
I think, well, the charter says that you do it
Today?
first meeting, yes. So, but that doesn't mean that you can't come to some conclusion and it be tabled.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
What does that mean? Come to some.
What, the
So we have
table?
to-
In other words, if,
so we have
you
to
know,
make a motion
you may have a
to
motion
table.
and we'll just table it.
Okay, all right. So
Okay.
we have to address it, but we have to.
That's right,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha, all right.
Okay, appointment to the Alcohol Board of Appeals. Then, under old business, We have the record ordinance. This is what you were saying should go
Yeah.
under new business?
Go ahead, Emily, and explain.
So we'll have to amend the budget to move it under new business, and Emily will explain
I'm in
why.
the agenda, right?
Amend the agenda.
What did I say?
We've split,
Budget.
Did I say budget?
Yes.
Well, there you go. I meant the
Just a
agenda.
budget person.
we split the records ordinance into two separate ordinances so that you could decide, give you some flexibility. And so you need to amend the agenda to move this to the new business, and we'll just discuss them both at the same time. And it's actually going to be Chapter 17, Article X, instead of Chapter 15, Article 8.
All right. All right.
Okay. Next item under what will be now number 2, under the, well,
Initiation of comprehensive plan?
yeah, right. This is a follow-up back to the December council meeting where 2 council members wanted to initiate a change in the comprehensive plan. So we are ready to do that. We have Amanda from Jacobs coming this evening.
Okay.
We'll go over the timeline of that. We are recommending to reinstitute the steering committee for one meeting to go through this process.
Okay.
So that's where
All
we
right.
are there.
And the towing thing goes back to as part of number 1?
Emily, is towing and wreckers,
There's going
is
to
that
be,
where you're splitting it?
yes, there's one that's non-consensual towing, Chapter 15, that's already on your new business
Okay, so-
agenda. And then the second one is the old business, Chapter 15, which,
But Marie said we're moving the one from old business to new, so we're
Right.
doing K1 is going to be L1.
two ordinances for
Okay,
records
so we're going to
and
have
new
2
business.
ordinances. Why don't we, if we could, just so we're not, I
Make
don't
it-
know how the clerk
make that
feels about
L2.
this, but, yeah, number 2, we'll deal with both of those, okay? Okay. The next one is amend the chapter for streets and sidewalks, Chapter 23.
Got it?
And that's the granite curb that you all asked for at the last meeting, the preservation of it, and then also the requirement of using granite curb, so that as item number 3 and 4. Number 5 is the engagement letter by Coleman Talley.
Gotcha.
Number 6 is the resolution qualifying fees for the upcoming elections this year.
All right.
Last item is the ordinance to provide for the temporary loan for our TAN, and Ed Wall is here. We did have a bid. That bid came in today. We did qualify it, and we did select Commerce Bank at 0.75%
Okay.
for a $5 million TAN, which will be a line of credit. And so when we get to that item, Ed will make the
Okay.
presentation. We do have an ordinance that will go along with that, so we will need the council to move on that so we can have a closing.
All right.
And there, I have nothing else on the agenda. Oh, excuse me. I have heard on a particular case that we have, a litigation case that we've been involved in, and as part of our executive session, we can do this after the council meeting. We do need to go into executive session for litigation.
So, no announcements. Is there a motion for executive session for personnel and for litigation?
That's under consent agenda.
I make a move that we go,
Do we do motions then? Do we have to do a motion?
No, the motion to adjourn, no, you just know, and then when we open the regular meeting, I'll make the statement to amend the agenda, and then you will have to make a motion to do that.
well, we don't do that during work session, do we?
Well, if they're going into, is that what he asked, a motion for executive session, or are you talking about a motion to amend the agenda?
We have executive session on the work session.
Correct.
For personnel, do you want it to be litigation too, or just personnel?
Well,
Personnel and litigation?
yeah, you could do both, but there's one part of litigation that the attorney is not here.
Susan's saying,
Yes.
let's just do let's just do personnel.
Two.
Right.
I move that we go into executive session for personnel discussions.
Second.
That's what I-
Susan said no.
No, I said, you said part of it will be on the regular, right?
Well, we'll do that in the regular too, but we need to do it now too.
Yeah.
All right, for personnel and litigation.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of executive session, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we're in executive session.
That one actually has enough. This one's powerful enough.
Look at that. You just boasting.
This is.